Ryan Smith was born in 1975 in San Diego, California, USA. From a young age, he harbored a strong desire to travel and learn about different cultures around the world. This passion ultimately led him to emigrate from his home country. At 27, Ryan was eager to explore Eurasia, particularly the former Soviet Union. In 2002, he embarked on a journey to Azerbaijan, a nation located at the crossroads of Eastern Europe and Western Asia, bordered by the Caspian Sea and the Caucasus Mountains. For Ryan, it was the ideal starting point for his adventures. In Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, Ryan immersed himself in the local language and culture. He worked in a carpet market within the walled city, learning about one of the region's oldest and most valued crafts. The tradition of carpet making is passed down through generations, and Ryan was captivated by the beauty of the carpets. This experience inspired him to consider starting a business focused on handmade carpets. In December 2005, Ryan returned to the United States to launch his project. While there, he met and married a young teacher named Laura. She encouraged Ryan to restrict his travels and concentrate on their life together. In 2011, they traveled to Georgia, a former Soviet republic bordering Azerbaijan, where they got married in the city of Marnoli and planned to produce traditional carpets. In 2014, their son Caleb was born. Meanwhile, Ryan and Laura worked on their long-awaited project of weaving handmade carpets using traditional Azerbaijani techniques that Ryan had developed. Each carpet had the potential to sell for over $1,000 in international markets. While Laura taught English at a local government school, Ryan traveled to nearby villages to find weavers to collaborate with. However, Ryan was surprised to find few artisans still practicing traditional methods. Some artisans who had initially expressed interest in the project later withdrew for various reasons, including disagreements over pricing and uncertainty about the designs. Ryan shared on his blog that during a 4-day visit to Kalari, a place he had not been to before, he found artisans who were willing to join his project. Ryan aimed to do more than just make a profit or preserve an ancient culture. He wanted to become a community benefactor by inviting women from the countryside, who possessed traditional weaving skills, to join his project. This opportunity would allow them to revive their craft and support their families. As a result, Ryan and Laura became one of the most respected couples in their town. Ryan considered this place to be incredibly special. His wife, Laura, connected deeply with the city and its people, engaging in teaching and forging numerous friendships. Meanwhile, Ryan promoted the art of carpet weaving from the ancient culture and earned admiration from the locals. Most residents regarded them as kind and trustworthy individuals they could turn to for help. They quickly assimilated into the local society, traditions, and culture, which led to them applying for citizenship in 2012, becoming citizens of both the United States and the state of Georgia. Laura and Ryan planned to build a kindergarten with a playground using their own funds. Just when they felt they had found a true home and a promising future for their family, tragedy struck unexpectedly, shattering all their dreams. In July 2018, Ryan, aged 43, and Laura, aged 42, decided to take a short vacation with their son Caleb to escape their daily routine. Laura's friend, Sabina Taliboba, recounted that Laura called her on July 4th to share their plans to go to the mountains, notifying her that they would be away for 2 days. They selected a small and picturesque spot near the Godori Mountains, known for its beautiful trails, waterfalls, and gorges, perfect for quiet walks and picnics in nature. However, instead of finding peace, they encountered a nightmare. Concerned about getting lost and wanting a safe experience for their son Caleb, they sought a local guide. They met Mokaz Kabori, a 19-year-old shepherd who, while not a resident of the area, was familiar with it as he often grazed livestock there. Mokaz had a calm demeanor and was well regarded by the locals, leading them to hire him as their guide. Shortly after their journey into the mountains began, Ryan and Laura discovered Mokaz's disturbing intentions. They hiked up to a clearing where they set up camp for dinner, near one of the local springs for fresh water. At some point, Ryan became concerned about how Mokaz was handling his weapon, which he always carried. This led to a heated argument between them. In an unexpected turn of events, Marquez turned the weapon on Ryan and attacked him in the head, followed by an attack to his back. The echoes of the gunfire were drowned out by Laura's terrified screams and Caleb's cries, but the worst was yet to unfold. Despite Laura's desperate pleas, Marquez pressed the weapon against Caleb's head and attacked the boy at point-blank range. Laura, terrified and unable to fully comprehend the horror unfolding before her, was left in shock. She froze in place, but as she met Marquez's cold stare, she realized his intentions. Driven by instinct to survive, Laura ran as fast as she could to escape the fate that had befallen her husband and son. However, when she reached the edge of the cliff by the waterfall, she found herself with nowhere to go. Marquez used his weapon to assault her, then pushed her off the cliff, causing her to land on the riverbank below. Afterward, investigators uncovered that Marquez had buried Caleb's body in a concealed location, along with the weapon he used. He then returned to the village as if nothing had happened. After several days without word from Laura, her friend Sabina grew concerned. She tried to contact both Laura and Ryan but received no response. Ryan's friends were also puzzled, as it was very unusual for him to go silent for such an extended period. On Friday, July 6, 2018, the Emergency Response and Emergency Situations Center received a report about a Georgian-American family that might be missing in the mountains. The caller, Sabina, informed them that the Smith family, including their 4-year-old son, had not been reachable for over 2 days. In response, a team of 15 rescuers was dispatched to the area where the family was last seen. When the rescuers arrived, they discovered Laura's belongings and vehicle. As they continued along the trail, they made a shocking discovery. They found a lifeless body at the bottom of a waterfall. This prompted the rescuers to intensify their search and widen the area they were covering. Later, they located another human body about 800 meters from the waterfall. Due to the heat and humidity typical of the season, the decomposition of the bodies was rapid. Initially, authorities reported that the victims showed no signs of violence. In accordance with Georgia's criminal code, an investigation was initiated, but details about Laura and Ryan's child, Caleb, remained unclear for several days. Investigators discovered that Marquez Kabori was the last person in contact with the family. As a result, he was arrested, and during questioning, he claimed to know the whereabouts of Caleb. For days after the Smith family went hiking in the mountains, he led investigators to where he had buried Caleb and the murder weapon. The following day, the Georgian Ministry of Internal Affairs announced that Marquez had been taken into custody and charged with the murders of the Smith family. This tragic incident shocked the nation, particularly in the Marnulli area and the local weaving community. The American consulate also expressed concern over the crime, and an FBI team joined Georgian authorities in the investigation, assisting with evidence collection and analysis. On July 11, the Tbilisi Municipal Court ordered that Marquez, who pleaded not guilty, be held in custody. He alleged that 2 foreigners in a black car were the actual killers. According to Marquez, these individuals murdered the Smith family, threatened him and his family to ensure he wouldn't report them to the police, and left him alive to divert suspicion onto him. Marquez's lawyer dismissed claims of violence against Laura, arguing that Marquez was incapable of such acts because he was a virgin. On July 12, friends, media activists, and members of public organizations gathered outside Ryan's house in Marnulli with toys, flowers, and candles to pay their respects and remember his family. The following day, Marquez's lawyer affirmed his client's innocence, stating that the crime was committed by 2 foreigners and that Marquez had initially pleaded guilty due to psychological pressure. However, evidence against Marquez began to surface. The most significant evidence came from the autopsy report of the victims. Ryan had 2 weapon wounds, one to the head and one to the back. Caleb was attacked in the head at close range. In Laura's case, the abuse and assault were confirmed, and DNA tests showed that the biological material found on her and her underwear matched Marquez's DNA. Additionally, DNA from both Ryan and Marquez was discovered on the murder weapon. An FBI technical examination of the Smith family and Marquez's phones revealed that Marquez's phone contained photos of Laura's lifeless body at the falls. He had shown these photos to several locals, claiming he had stumbled upon the body while walking in the area. Investigators also discovered that Maucaz had visited several adult websites in the days leading up to the incident. These findings led investigators to believe that Maucaz had a personal interest in Laura and that his actions were premeditated from the moment the Smith family contacted him for a trip to the falls. Following the investigation's results, Maucaz's lawyer, David, resigned, citing principled reasons for not being able to continue defending him. Another lawyer took over the case, maintaining Maucaz's innocence and filing a motion to retract his earlier confession. Maucaz's mother supported her son and agreed with the position of the new lawyer. The defense argued that police may have coerced Maucaz into confessing under threats of imprisonment. His family claimed that the high-profile nature of the case led the authorities to charge him quickly in order to close it. Nevertheless, on November 9, 2018, Maucaz Kabori was formally charged with murdering 3 members of the Smith family. He also faced additional abuse charges against Laura. A psychological evaluation indicated that Maucaz was mentally fit for trial. His pre-trial detention was scheduled to end on April 9, 2019, but the prosecutor asserted that they had strong evidence of his guilt and that he would receive appropriate punishment for his crimes. On March 25, 2019, the court unanimously found Maucaz guilty of premeditated murder with particular cruelty toward 3 members of the Smith family. He committed these murders to cover up another crime, namely, the abuse. On March 27, 2019, Judge Goga Kopriashvili of the Gori District Court sentenced Maucaz Kabori to life in prison. While his family protested the sentence, claiming it was unjust, the friends and family of Smith felt relieved by the verdict. The defense attorneys announced plans to appeal, arguing that there were procedural errors in the trial. The U.S. consul in Georgia stated that the verdict brought justice to the Smith family, noting that the evidence clearly proved Maucaz's guilt. From the moment Ryan and Laura Smith arrived in Georgia, they earned the love and respect of the Marnulli community. Their brutal murder deeply affected the community they had chosen to make their home. Laura and Ryan Smith's community project not only revived an ancient tradition but also provided income and stability to many local women. After their tragic deaths, many women who were striving to build successful businesses experienced sadness and uncertainty. However, the project was later revitalized by investors who supported Ryan's vision and created opportunities for local artisans. Ryan and Laura left their familiar life in the West to explore a new culture. They received a warm welcome from the community, but their lives were filled with sadness because there was a mysterious person hiding their true nature behind the guise of a kind shepherd. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Jennifer Kess. Jennifer was an American woman from Orlando, Florida. She attended the University of Central Florida in Orlando, graduating in 2003 with a degree in finance. In 2006, 24-year-old, she seemed to have everything going for her. She had a thriving personal life, was excelling at work. She currently works as a financial manager at Central Florida Investments timeshare company in Ocoee, and recently purchased a condo in Orlando. According to her best friend, Jennifer was always cautious about her safety and carried pepper spray with her at all times. On Sunday, January 22, 2006, Jennifer returned from a vacation with her boyfriend, Rob Allen. They had been dating for about a year. Since Rob lived approximately 3 hours away from Jennifer's apartment in Orlando, they could only see each other on weekends. On Monday, January 23, Jennifer returned to work after her vacation. That day, she called her mother, Joyce Kessy, to talk about her trip. Joyce later said Jennifer sounded happy and refreshed during the call. After work, Jennifer went home and called her boyfriend around 10 p.m. The conversation did not go well. Jennifer felt upset, as she believed Rob didn't love her enough. She was frustrated that they lived far apart and could only see each other on weekends. She told him that this arrangement wasn't enough for her. The two argued, and the call ended on a bad note. Rob could not have imagined that this would be their final conversation. The next morning, after Rob called her early in the morning as usual, his call went straight to her voicemail. Jennifer didn't show up to work and stopped answering her phone, which was highly unusual. Concerned, her coworkers contacted her parents, who immediately became alarmed. On their way to Jennifer's apartment, her parents called local hospitals and reported her disappearance to the police. When Jennifer's parents arrived at her apartment, everything appeared normal. The apartment manager used a spare key to unlock the door, and they found her suitcase in a clean and tidy living space, as if a maid had just cleaned it. However, the bathroom was noticeably disorganized. Jennifer's mother explained that Jennifer often rushed out in the mornings, leaving the bathroom messy. Inside, they found scattered cosmetics, curling iron clamps, a wet crumpled towel, and water droplets everywhere. Jennifer's bedtime t-shirt was on the floor, all suggesting she had spent the night there. Strangely, her purse, keys, and cell phone were missing. It seemed evident that Jennifer had stayed at home the night before, woke up, started her usual morning routine, left the apartment, locked the door, and then disappeared. Jennifer's brother, Logan Kesey, began questioning nearby construction workers to find out if they had seen Jennifer or noticed anything suspicious that morning. However, the workers refused to cooperate or share any information, which fueled Logan's suspicion that they might know something but were unwilling to speak. The Kesey family grew increasingly frustrated with the police, who initially showed little urgency. Authorities believed Jennifer might have had an argument with her boyfriend and left on her own, expecting her to return soon. Later that evening, when Jennifer still hadn't returned, the police officially declared her missing. Although evidence showed she had been in her apartment that morning, authorities initially speculated she might have been abducted the previous night. Based on cell tower data, they concluded she wasn't at home that night. However, her parents strongly disagreed, maintaining that she had stayed in her apartment overnight. Further analysis later confirmed that the initial interpretation of the cell data was incorrect. Jennifer had, in fact, spent the night in her apartment. Rob was questioned by investigators, and he provided a clear alibi, proving that he had nothing to do with his lover's death. Jennifer's family and friends immediately organized efforts to find her, distributing flyers with her photo and appeals for help throughout Orlando. Hundreds of people joined the search. However, as the hours turned into days, hope of finding Jennifer alive began to fade. The police struggled to find leads, and while various theories were proposed, nothing concrete emerged. Witnesses reported seeing Jennifer's car leaving her apartment complex around 7:40 a.m. on the morning she disappeared. However, they couldn't identify who was driving or which direction the car went. 2 days after Jennifer went missing, a tip came into the sheriff's office. Jennifer's car was found abandoned at the apartment complex, located nearly 2 kilometers from her own apartment. Jennifer had no known ties to this area, and her family stated that she had never been there before. When police found the car, they asked Rob to inspect it with them, as they were particularly interested in his reaction. Initially, police feared they might find Jennifer's body, but they found no signs of a struggle or foul play. The car appeared normal. Inside, they discovered Jennifer's cell phone, charger, sandals, and shoes, nothing out of place. Despite continued investigations, no additional evidence was found. The mystery of Jennifer Kesey's disappearance persisted, leaving her family and friends in anguish, desperate for answers they might never fully receive. Was it a robbery or a car theft? Witnesses might have seen who was inside the car, but none could be located. However, police soon discovered crucial evidence when reviewing surveillance footage in the area where the car was found. Around noon on the day Jennifer disappeared, a camera recorded someone driving her car. The person briefly parked near the pool area, reversed, sat in the car for 32 seconds, then got out and walked away without looking back. The surveillance camera captured images every 3 seconds, but the individual's face was obscured each time by a fence post. As a result, their identity could not be determined. Based on the person's walk, police concluded it was a man about 1.65 meters tall, dressed like a construction worker. Detectives distributed the photo, hoping someone might recognize the man from his walk, height, or general appearance. But no leads emerged. At the time, renovations were underway at Jennifer's apartment complex. She had told her parents that construction workers would stop what they were doing and stare at her whenever she walked by. The workers frequently changed, and many were reportedly undocumented. Possibly because of this, they were uncooperative with the investigation and avoided speaking to the police. Due to language barriers, investigators were unable to question these individuals, and no additional evidence linking them to the case was discovered. There were no surveillance cameras in Jennifer's apartment building, and security relied only on a guard logging visitors' names. However, police found that the visitor log had been left blank. In addition, investigators failed to thoroughly search Jennifer's apartment. No security measures were implemented to protect her home, which allowed around 14 people to enter the apartment before the investigation moved forward. This mismanagement significantly harmed the case. Police were also unable to recover fingerprints from the steering wheel or rear-view mirror of Jennifer's car. It is uncertain whether these areas were wiped clean during the brief period when the car was parked. No traces of DNA were found in the vehicle either. Overall, the investigators' efforts were poorly executed, causing the case to stall. By 2008, on the second anniversary of Jennifer's disappearance, her family and friends gathered in Orlando, holding posters with her image in hopes that someone might recognize her. In 2009, a detective revisited the case with a fresh perspective. He tried to talk to a maid who had worked at Jennifer's apartment complex since 2006. The woman said she remembered the young woman's disappearance. When detectives showed her the surveillance photo of the person seen driving Jennifer's car, the maid commented that he looked like a man she had seen before. She wasn't entirely sure, but the man's walk and hairstyle reminded her of him. The detective discovered that the man had previously lived and worked at Jennifer's apartment complex. He had performed maintenance work in Jennifer's apartment just a week before she disappeared. Tracking the man down was easy. He was serving time in a Florida prison for assaulting a young woman, a crime committed 2 years after Jennifer's disappearance. The detective met with him and questioned him about his work in Jennifer's apartment. He admitted to performing maintenance there and claimed that Jennifer had let him in before leaving for work. When shown the surveillance photo of a person resembling him, the man denied it was him, pointing out that the individual appeared to be about 10 centimeters shorter than he is. He was cooperative and denied any involvement. He agreed to take a polygraph test, which he passed. The detective then interviewed another worker, who had assisted the man with repairs at Jennifer's apartment. The co-worker confirmed they had worked there and stated that everything had gone smoothly. The detective also spoke to the apartment complex manager to check if Jennifer had experienced any conflicts with the man or others. The manager reported that they had noticed no issues. In 2010, this detective was removed from Jennifer's case. Over time, the Kessie family began to feel that the Orlando Police Department had abandoned them. But the police insisted the investigation was still active. In reality, the case had been largely neglected. In 2016, a decade after Jennifer's disappearance, she was officially declared dead in Florida. 2 years later, in December 2018, her parents, Joyce and Drew Kessie, filed a lawsuit against the Orlando Police Department to gain access to police records from the case. The lawsuit was settled in March 2019. The Orlando police chief gave investigators 6 months to review the case. But when no new leads emerged, he made a pivotal decision. In an unprecedented move, The police department handed over all case materials to the Kesse family. Jennifer's parents received more than 16,000 pages of documents and 67 hours of video and audio recordings. By mutual agreement, the official investigation was closed. The Kesse family then hired private detective to review the case. After examining the files 3 times, the detective expressed shock at the many critical mistakes and oversights made by the Orlando police. The detective began by revisiting the crime scene and speaking with residents of Jennifer's apartment complex. One neighbor had lived there for 2 years before Jennifer disappeared, shared her concerns. She initially appreciated the gated complex with security, but grew uneasy when construction workers began occupying empty apartments. She explained, "When I came home from work, there would be a group of drunk men outside. They would yell unpleasant things or stare at me inappropriately as I walked by. It made me very uncomfortable." Despite complaining to the building management, no action was taken. Another neighbor described even more troubling experiences. She revealed that construction workers had entered her apartment while she was away. She noticed unsettling signs, such as her underwear drawer being opened, evidence of someone using her shower, and footprints in her closet. She also recalled a disturbing incident where she caught one of the workers watching her through a window while engaging in indecent behavior. She reported the incident to the police, but the man was never held accountable. He was merely fired and disappeared. A third neighbor revealed that a construction worker had approached her in the parking lot at night, attempting to start conversations and coming across as overly pushy. She said she encountered him several times a week. In contrast, a fourth neighbor had a more positive impression of the same worker. She said, "I remember him as cheerful, friendly, and talkative." She moved into the complex shortly after Jennifer's disappearance and recalled that this worker frequently visited her apartment. However, Jennifer's name was never mentioned in their conversations. What unsettled this neighbor was that 9 months after Jennifer vanished, the worker suddenly left the complex overnight and disappeared. The man was found through descriptions from neighbors and passed a polygraph test. At this time, when the investigation progressed, the detective uncovered a potential lead. 10 months after Jennifer vanished, a witness reported seeing someone throw a rolled-up carpet into a lake near her apartment complex. At the time, construction workers living in an apartment across from Jennifer's were seen moving carpets, raising suspicions that Jennifer's body might have been hidden in one of the carpets and discarded in the lake. In November 2019, 12 years after Jennifer's disappearance, local police, along with a team of divers, searched the lake where the carpet was reportedly dumped. Despite searching for 2 days, no evidence was found. It has now been 13 years since Jennifer Kesse vanished. After investigating the case for several years, private detective proposed a new theory about her disappearance. Based on interviews with residents of Jennifer's apartment complex, he discovered that approximately 10 construction workers had been living in an empty apartment directly across from Jennifer's unit. He speculated that on the morning of January 24, 2006, as Jennifer was leaving her apartment and locking her door, some of these workers attacked her from behind and dragged her into the vacant apartment. Unfortunately, identifying these individuals has proven impossible, as there are no records or contracts documenting their names. Jennifer's parents have dedicated their lives to finding her. Despite investing significant time and money, they have not yet succeeded. Jennifer's mother expressed the pain of their ongoing search, saying, "It's very, very hard to move forward. The hole in our hearts will remain until we have answers." Jennifer's boyfriend, Rob Allen, also shared that he frequently thinks of her and imagines the life they might have had together if not for this tragedy. The Jennifer Kesse case remains one of the most mysterious and heartbreaking missing persons cases, enduring for more than 18 years without clear answers. The Kesse family continues to seek justice and holds hope that one day, new clues will emerge to help solve the case. The Kessie family remains hopeful for Jennifer's return. They are offering a $15,000 reward for any information that could lead to her whereabouts. Despite extensive investigations and search efforts, Jennifer's whereabouts remain unknown to this day. This case serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of sustaining public interest and support in the pursuit of justice for missing persons. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Heather Garaus. Shauna Nelson has been a 911 switchboard employee for about 13 years. She is known for being calm and professional. Shauna and Greeley Ignacio Garaus met while playing on the same baseball team, where they got to know each other and even flirted. However, there is one important detail. Shauna has been a wife and mother of 3 for many years. She is married to Weld Ken Nelson, who also works for the police department. Despite this, Shauna believes that her marriage is over, and she no longer feels attracted to her husband. Her relationship with Greeley began when her marriage was falling apart. During this difficult time, she found herself attracted to him, and their friendship quickly turned into love. However, Greeley was also married. His wife, Heather Garaus, was someone he met during his senior year of college. They were affectionate and supportive of each other, and their initial attraction blossomed into a loving marriage. Greeley seemed like the perfect partner, which was important to Heather because she had suffered abuse in a previous relationship. Early on, Greeley witnessed the abuse in Heather's relationship with her ex-boyfriend, who began stalking her. Fortunately, Greeley stepped in and quickly resolved the situation, chasing the stalker away. He helped Heather put an end to the abuse she was enduring. Just a few months into their relationship, Greeley proposed to Heather. She accepted his proposal, but with one important condition. She required his unwavering loyalty and warned that if he cheated on her, they would end their relationship forever. Soon after finishing school, the newlyweds began their careers. Heather worked at a bank while going to school, and now she could devote more time to her work. She applied for a management position and quickly began climbing the career ladder. Within a few years, Heather became the head of the bank where she worked. Greeley was a police officer and was heavily involved in city management. He balanced his dedication to his job with his love for his wife. 5 years after their wedding, they finally welcomed their first daughter. Heather's life seemed stable, but fate had many challenges in store for the couple. The first challenge came in 1997, when Heather's father suddenly died of a heart attack. She struggled to cope with the loss, but that was only the beginning. A week later, Heather's mother was diagnosed with cancer. Despite early detection, the medical technology of the time was not effective in treating it. Despite the efforts of doctors and various therapies, the disease progressed, and Heather's mother passed away in 2003, unable to overcome the illness. After these events, Heather fell into a deep depression. She had always been very close to her parents and never expected to lose them so suddenly and at such a young age. She struggled to cope with the loss. Managing household chores had previously come easily to her, but now it was difficult. Her husband, Greeley, tried to support her by being understanding, spending more time with their daughter, and helping with the housework. However, despite his efforts, he felt stuck and could not make progress for several months. Greeley was busy with his work at the police station and could only attend to his housework in his spare time. Over time, frustration began to build. The couple sought the help of a therapist, who prescribed medication to help Heather overcome her depression and regain focus on her life. Gradually, the therapy began to work, and she started to participate in her normal activities again. However, the stress of the past few months took its toll on their relationship. Greeley, feeling overwhelmed, began to seek comfort outside of their marriage. Greeley increasingly stayed late at work, seemingly avoiding his family. It was during this time that he met Shauna and Weld after a baseball game. Greeley and Shauna began a secret romantic relationship. It seemed they did not hide their affair well, as almost everyone at the police station knew about it. From the start, Greeley and Shauna's relationship was tumultuous. Shauna had a hot temper and often had difficulty controlling her emotions. This led to aggressive outbursts during their arguments, regardless of who was around. The main source of conflict was Greeley's marriage. He did not want to leave his wife, while Shauna pressured him to be with her. She declared that she would leave her husband for Greeley at any time. After 6 months of this troubled relationship, things took a turn when Shauna announced that she was pregnant with Greeley's child. Greeley denied paternity, believing that her husband was the father. However, Shauna argued that her husband had undergone a vasectomy after they had 3 children, leaving him infertile. She insisted that Greeley was the father. Greeley began pressuring Shauna to have an abortion. It was clear that Greeley had no intention of leaving his wife for her. Shauna, feeling trapped in this situation, realized that her husband Weld would leave her if he found out she was pregnant. She eventually felt forced to have an abortion, a choice she would regret for a long time. However, Shauna could not learn from the experience. In mid-2005, she became pregnant again with Greeley's child, and this time refused to have an abortion. This new pregnancy prompted Shauna to try to keep Greeley close to her and the child. In response, Greeley tried to distance himself from Shauna. She now planned to expose Greeley's infidelity to his wife, Heather. She believed that if Heather found out the truth, she would leave Greeley, allowing him to be with Shauna. Shauna's first encounter with Greeley's wife, Heather, turned into a nightmare for Shauna. She followed Heather in a store, then approached Heather, boasted about her intimate relationship with Greeley, and claimed that Heather's husband loved Shauna. Shauna's inappropriate behavior backfired. Even after she admitted to cheating and having an affair with Greeley, Heather still did not believe her. Heather considered her a scammer. Shauna did not stop there. She continued to contact Heather via phone, text, and social media. Heather blocked her number, but it did not work. Shauna followed her and showed up unexpectedly to see Heather around town. Heather was distressed and often shared her concerns with her family and husband about Shauna's disturbing behavior. Unfortunately, Greeley was unable to intervene, as discussions with Shauna were no longer productive. Heather was confused and scared by these situations. Greeley promised to fix the problem, but his attempts to communicate with Shauna did not go well. She continued to act increasingly brazen and obsessive. To the surprise of those around her, she even showed up uninvited at a party at Greeley's house. At this point, their secret relationship had lasted about 2 years. All of Greeley's attempts to end things with Shauna caused her to become depressed and reckless. Fortunately, she was eventually kicked out of the party. The joy did not last long. The next morning, Shauna continued to visit the Greeley house. Early that morning, she knocked on the door while Greeley was still sleeping. Even so, she insisted on knocking to wake him up. Heather tried to calm down the panicked Shauna and even threatened to call the police, unaware that Shauna also worked in law enforcement. Eventually, Heather became so confused that she felt the need to gain a better understanding of the situation. She worried not only for her own safety, but also for her family, especially her daughter, fearing that Shauna might harm them. A major conflict broke out when Greeley finally woke up. He tried to calm Heather down, promising to work things out with Shauna. Meanwhile, Shauna's husband, Weld, was unaware of her infidelity, despite also working in the police force. His curiosity was piqued when he accidentally glanced at her diary on the table in their bedroom. As he read through it, Weld discovered details of Shauna's affair with Greeley, a painful revelation for him. She described in detail how Weld had lost all attraction to her, and that Greeley was not her first lover. She had been unfaithful for a long time. When the truth was revealed, Weld was shocked and angry to learn that the affair had lasted for 2 years, and that Heather and Greeley had even been intimate in their family home and car. Weld wanted a divorce and was open about it. During an argument about the affair, Shauna revealed that she was pregnant by her lover. She tried to play on Weld's emotions by mentioning his infertility and claiming that she just wanted another child, which caused her to seek comfort outside their marriage. However, Weld was not moved by her attempts to manipulate him and told her to leave the house. This put Shauna in a difficult position. She did not want to leave Weld, and the thought of being a single mother was terrifying. She decided to contact Greeley, the father of her unborn child. After the marriage ended, she hoped to reconnect with Greeley. She excitedly shared with Greeley that she was divorcing her husband and had decided to keep their child. She ignored Greeley's hesitation about the divorce and repeatedly expressed her desire for him to start a family with her. At this point, Greeley only wanted to reconcile with his wife Heather. He no longer valued Shauna and insisted on having an abortion. Shauna was angry because she felt unsupported and did not expect Greeley to turn his back on her. Realizing that Greeley would not meet her expectations, she chose to contact Weld, her ex-husband. Unfortunately, he was hurt and did not want to talk to her during this difficult time. Feeling lonely, Shauna sought support from her best friend, Michelle Moore. Michelle and Shauna had been friends since childhood and had a close relationship, as they both worked in law enforcement, with Michelle being a deputy sheriff. Shauna often confided in Michelle about her feelings. Michelle encouraged Shauna to mend her relationship with her husband, Weld. However, Shauna would not give up on her plans to start a family with Greeley. She thought about their future and considered his wife the main obstacle to her happiness, which she planned to deal with later. Following Michelle's advice, Shauna reconciled with Weld. Despite their past problems, Weld forgave her and agreed to adopt her unborn child as his own. In March 2006, Shauna gave birth to a baby boy. Greeley tried to keep this a secret from his wife by lying. However, Heather had long suspected Greeley of having an affair. Shauna's behavior was not only strange, but it also raised more serious concerns. Greeley was skilled at avoiding direct questions, making it difficult for Heather to confront him. That spring, while they were out for a walk, Heather pressed him to tell the truth. Greeley finally admitted that he had been having an affair with Shauna Nelson, who had been following them. Despite this confession, he claimed that they had ended their relationship, but this was not true. Greeley continued to have an affair with Shauna, despite her stalking, which only intensified her feelings for him. He found Shauna's actions disturbing, but he did not end the relationship. Greeley was at a loss as to how to handle the situation. Heather was surprised to learn that the affair had lasted for a long time. Greeley later revealed that Shauna was pregnant with his second child and had chosen not to abort the baby. He attempted to rationalize Shauna's behavior by saying that her husband was infertile and that she wanted to become pregnant. Heather did not make a hasty decision. She had said before that if he were unfaithful, she would leave him immediately. However, she had now changed her mind and did not want to leave the man she had been married to for nearly 10 years. Greeley realized that his situation with Shauna had spiraled out of control. He sought Heather's forgiveness and vowed not to cheat on her again, hoping to save their marriage. They agreed to put the matter aside for the time being. Regardless, Heather could not allow her husband to maintain a relationship with Shauna. Heather felt that her husband needed to resolve this issue as soon as possible and that he had to cut ties with Shauna and the child. After all of this, Heather felt hurt and betrayed by the husband she had trusted. After their encounter, she called her family to express her frustration in detail, hoping to find comfort. Her relatives supported her desire to mend her relationship with her husband. To do this, she planned to seek guidance from a psychologist to help save their family. Greeley had to completely cut off contact with Shauna, even at work. That evening, he called Shauna on speakerphone to break up with her while his wife was present. Shauna was devastated by the breakup and began bombarding Heather with text messages and calls. Her messages included alarming threats and violent images, blaming Heather for her problems and ignoring the fact that she had interfered in someone else's family when Greeley no longer wanted to be with her. Shauna's behavior became increasingly erratic, culminating in a tragic incident on the evening of January 23, 2007. A witness came to the police station after witnessing an attack. Heather initially spoke to her co-workers in the parking lot before walking to their car. Suddenly, a man dressed in black and wearing a mask appeared and approached Heather. The attacker raised a weapon, ordered Heather to her knees, and yelled that Heather had ruined her life. 2 shots were then fired, and Heather was hit and fell to the ground. The dressed in black quickly fled the scene. When police arrived, Heather was unconscious but still breathing. She had head and chest injuries and was in critical condition, so she was taken to the intensive care unit. Tragically, she later died at the hospital. Police quickly identified Heather as the wife of one of their employees. They launched an immediate investigation, beginning with an interview with a witness, a co-worker of Heather's. The witness reported that the attacker was dressed in black, making it difficult to see their faces. The witness was unable to determine the attacker's gender, as it was difficult to tell from a distance whether they were a woman or a man. After the shooting, the attacker quickly left in a pickup truck, but the witness did not see the license plate number. Greeley received a call that day while he was with his daughter, waiting for his wife to return from work. He was shocked by the tragic news, as he never expected something so devastating to happen. He provided the investigation with important clues that could aid in the search. Despite Shauna's suspicious behavior, he could not believe that she would kill Heather. The officers were deeply affected by the incident. They checked Shauna's and Greeley's cars. Based on the description, Shauna's husband Weld's car matched the one the suspect had used to flee. The officers quickly went to their home. When they arrived, Weld spoke to the officers and stated that he had not used his car on the day of the murder, but that Shauna had driven it out several times. They decided to track the pickup truck using surveillance camera footage. The footage showed the truck leaving the crime scene and heading toward a winery located on the edge of town. A driver got out of the truck, dressed entirely in black, and his face was not visible. However, the police noticed an important detail. The driver was barefoot, despite the snow and cold. While checking the area between the 2 locations, they discovered discarded clothing and shoes that clearly belonged to a man. They quickly tested for gunpowder residue and confirmed its presence at the crime scene, along with tire tracks from the suspect's car. The police suspected that Weld could be a potential suspect. However, he had a solid alibi, as he was working at the time of the attack, which led to increased suspicion of Shauna. The liquor store owner reported that a barefoot woman had come in that evening, and he recognized her as Shauna. When the police spoke to Shauna, she said she had been having a headache all day and had gone out to buy alcohol. In her statement, she explained that when she got to the store, she realized she had forgotten her wallet, which was why she seemed different. Shauna intended to buy alcohol to relieve her headache, but when she got to the store, she had to leave empty-handed because she had no money. When she stepped outside, her husband Weld suddenly appeared and urged her to get out of the pickup, saying that things looked bad. At that point, Shauna's headache intensified and she passed out, not remembering anything until the next morning. Shauna's story lacked credibility, and the police suspected that she was lying. During the investigation, it was discovered that Shauna's friend, Assistant Chief of Police Michelle Moore, had actively helped her. The reason for Michelle's animosity toward Heather is still unclear. According to Michelle's confession, she helped Shauna because she was her best friend. Michelle assisted in planning the attack on Heather and provided advice on how to cover up their actions, almost like a consultation based on her police expertise. They planned and executed the crime in a very clever manner. Both women were arrested and charged with Heather's murder. Michelle Moore received a 10-year prison sentence for her role in the crime. Although she could have faced a much longer sentence, her sentence was significantly reduced due to a plea agreement and her admission of guilt. During the trial, Michelle stated that over the years, she and Shauna had developed a close friendship. Shauna confided in her about her problems, so Michelle was very understanding of the challenges Heather's family faced, especially the troubled relationship between Shauna and Greeley. Throughout these difficult times, Michelle was always there to support Shauna, especially when Greeley contacted Shauna while he was with his wife, calling to break up with her. Initially, Shauna couldn't believe what he said and thought he was just acting. However, she soon realized that the conversation meant Greeley had decided to return to his wife and was no longer interested in Shauna. This finally caused Shauna to lose her temper. She turned back to Michelle. Meanwhile, Shauna manipulated Michelle into turning against Heather. It was clear that Shauna used manipulative tactics with people to get what she wanted. Michelle fell into Shauna's trap and decided to help her. Michelle ended up playing a key role in planning the crime. Thanks to Michelle, Shauna had full access to forensic science resources and expert guidance. Michelle advised Shauna on how to act and how to use the internet to avoid detection. As a result, Shauna quickly stopped making any suspicious online requests, even from her work devices. During questioning, Shauna pretended to be surprised when she was informed of the murder charge, claiming that she had no memory of the shooting. However, there was substantial evidence against her. Prior to the hearing, Shauna was placed behind bars. The trial was moved to a nearby county due to heavy media coverage before the trial and concerns that the jury might already know the details of the case. This move was made to ensure that both the prosecution and defense attorneys were fair. In February 2008, the prosecutor and defense attorney addressed the jury. The prosecution alleged that Shauna had affairs with married police officers. However, it was her obsession with Greeley that stood out. She became so infatuated that she nearly divorced him, became pregnant, and eventually killed his wife, who had separated them. Several witnesses gave compelling testimony. One police officer claimed that Shauna had expressed her deep hatred for Heather, stating that during practice at the shooting range, she had visualized Heather's face as a target. Shauna vehemently denied her guilt and tried to blame others. The prosecutor presented a clear timeline of events, supported by numerous witnesses and evidence. It appeared that Shauna had planned the violent crime in advance and intended to frame her husband, Weld. She used Weld's car and clothes, taken from the laundry basket, which contained his DNA and would help conceal her identity. The prosecution argued that Shauna wanted to remove two obstacles that would prevent her from being with Greeley: her husband and Greeley's wife, Heather Garaus, because her husband might want to divide the assets in a divorce. After some deliberation, the jury found Shauna Nelson guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced her to life in prison without parole. Greeley, who had gained custody of Shauna's daughter after Heather's death, Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case. The case of Paul Lambert. The world is full of mysteries, and sometimes danger is closer than we realize. Today's story illustrates how even ordinary events can become a nightmare for someone. Paul Lambert, who was born Paul Scales, was born in 1980 in Queensland, Australia. He had an older sister and several half-siblings from his father's side. When Paul was 4, his parents decided to divorce and agreed that their mother would have custody of the children. Despite facing some challenges during this time, Paul appeared to be a typical child. However, as time went on, his mother began to notice troubling behaviors in him. She took him to a doctor, who diagnosed him with a disorder related to his parents' separation, suggesting that it would improve over time. Unfortunately, several years passed, and Paul's behavior continued to deteriorate. By the time he was 10, his mother was nearly in despair, as her son had become completely uncontrollable. He was diagnosed with multiple conditions, including attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and began treatment that seemed to provide some relief. Despite facing many challenges, Paul excelled in school. In 1998, he graduated from high school and enrolled at the Queensland University of Technology to pursue a degree in business and finance. His intelligence allowed him to succeed with ease. After completing his studies, he obtained a job in the finance department of a motorcycle dealership in North Queensland, where he worked as part of a large team. His co-workers found him charming, articulate, intelligent, and friendly, always ready to assist others. He even helped a colleague raise funds for her daughter's medical treatment. However, that is only a part of his personality that he wants to show to everyone. Although he appeared kind and generous, regularly donating to charities and supporting friends and family, his true nature was known only to his family. In reality, he was a manipulator struggling with mental health issues who refused to seek help. A skilled liar, Paul used his eloquence to achieve his aims, often employing threats of self-harm as a tactic to manipulate others. From 2003 to 2010, Paul had several different girlfriends, all of whom were beautiful. However, a troubling pattern emerged in his relationships. He exhibited extreme aggressive behavior. By the 6th year, 5 different women had obtained restraining orders against him, but even this did not stop him. He violated several of them and was held accountable. Paul treated all his ex-girlfriends similarly. They described him as a manipulator who sought to control their lives in a cruel manner. He frequently belittled them emotionally and even became violent when discussions about breakups arose, creating unsafe conditions for their well-being. Paul had a troubling habit. He would reach out to the families of girls who tried to leave their unsatisfactory relationships. Whenever he sensed that he was losing control, he would repeatedly call the girls' relatives, trying to intimidate and stalk them. His goal was to delay the breakup and keep his latest partner with him for as long as possible. To do this, Paul made up stories and attempted to hide his actions. When the truth came out and difficult conversations started, he often blamed his mental health issues. It seemed he genuinely believed that his disorders could excuse his cruel and irrational behavior. However, the girls and their families insisted that he needed to seek help from a psychiatric clinic. Unfortunately, he did not seek help on his own, and law enforcement did not take action, allowing another girl to fall under his influence. Paul claimed to have dissociative identity disorder, describing his personalities as good and evil, and sometimes giving them names. He admitted that he might have as many as 9 different personas. Despite this, Paul was a charismatic individual with a strong ability to charm women. He was attractive, but his idealized relationships quickly fell apart, typically lasting no more than a month. In 2014, he tried to settle down by proposing to his ex-girlfriend Samantha, whom he had dated in 2008. However, their relationship ended due to his aggressive and cruel behavior, which included stalking her, although they remained in contact for 6 years, during which Samantha urged him to seek professional help. Paul managed to persuade her that he could be a good husband and would definitely pursue treatment, leading her to agree to marry him. They officially tied the knot on February 2, 2014. Of course, all his promises turned out to be lies. Initially, Things appeared to be going well, but within a few weeks the situation started to deteriorate rapidly. After 7 months of living together, their marriage had become unbearable. Paul was losing control, and Samantha felt ready to end the relationship for good. In a last-ditch effort to save their marriage, she suggested they take a trip together. In September 2014, they traveled to Orlando, Florida, hoping to improve their relationship before returning to Australia. Although the trip seemed romantic and had the potential to mend their relationship, once they returned home, Paul continued his old behavior. Unsurprisingly, the situation only worsened. Then, Paul creates a profile on Tinder, presenting himself in the best possible way. He received messages from many women, but was searching for something truly special. He connected with Brittany Killa, a beautiful and well-known 32-year-old television presenter with a promising future. Brittany was using the app to find a relationship, and Paul quickly caught her attention. They began messaging, then exchanged social media and email contacts, and eventually had several video calls on Skype. Paul is completely captivated by Brittany, to the point where he wants to end his relationship with his wife. In March 2015, Paul informed Brittany that he was going to Florida because he wanted to be with her. By this time, they had developed a good rapport. Brittany had no idea that Paul was hiding significant issues. He was adept at concealing his flaws, and Brittany unwittingly became another victim. When Brittany learned about his divorce, she expressed that she didn't want to be the reason for his family's breakup. She asked Paul to stay in Australia, but he lied, claiming he was already divorced and had no ties holding him back. This convinced Brittany to give him a chance, and she agreed to spend 3 months with him to deepen their connection. Finally, they met in person. Although Paul is not officially divorced, he continued to deceive Brittany. At first, he presented himself as a caring and loving man, but soon, his true nature revealed itself. Brittany noticed his odd and unpredictable behavior, which suggested he was struggling to manage his emotions. As a sensible person, Brittany understood that the relationship should come to an end. Unfortunately, this decision was a clear signal for Paul to take action. He started overwhelming Brittany with messages and calls, insisting she spend the next 3 months with him, as they had initially agreed. He believed she could not simply abandon her commitments, claiming he had traveled across the ocean for her, and felt that she had treated him poorly. But all of this was in vain. Paul could not convince Brittany. Then, Paul began telling her that his father had just died, and he needed support, claiming that Brittany was the only close person he had in the US. Ultimately, this worked. She believed his story, thinking that no one would make up something like that. Her father had died from a brain tumor a few years ago, so she understood how hard it was for him. Paul knew about this and intentionally used this trick to manipulate her to lure Brittany into a trap. She supported him and tried to build their relationship. Of course, this didn't affect his behavior. He became increasingly unstable. So after a while, Brittany decided to cut ties again. Then, Paul began to threaten to take his own life. Unfortunately, this trick worked again, and their relationship continued. What bothered Brittany most was her boyfriend's behavior when she had to work away from home for long hours. He sent her dozens of messages and emails, and could even call her when she was on live air. Naturally, this was a significant problem for the journalist, and could potentially cost her the job she had dedicated her entire life to. Brittany couldn't withstand the pressure and tried to break up with him again. Then he started making up new absurd stories that became increasingly bizarre. Paul started telling her that all this time she had not been dating him, but his twin brother, who was the one behaving inappropriately. This time, Brittany did not believe these stories. Then Paul recounted how he had been abused in childhood, claiming that this had led to his current emotional state. Paul again tried to elicit pity from Brittany in every possible way. This whole lie culminated in he confessing that he had a brain tumor and would soon die. Paul added that he was afraid of dying alone. He was once again convincing enough for Brittany to believe him. All of this led to the continuation of their relationship. But Samantha lived in constant fear. She cried every day, and panic attacks began. During the day, Brittany was so tense that she felt constantly unwell. She planned to exit the relationship again, but Paul was prepared to keep her. He threatened to expose naked photographs of her. Now her career, which she had built her entire conscious life around, was at stake. Paul even started sending threatening messages on Brittany's social media, calling her a killer and hinting that he would take his own life if she broke up with him. As a result, Brittany was forced to delete several of her social media profiles. As a public figure, she needed to manage her social media presence to promote herself. Naturally, Paul was aware of this and willingly used it as a means of control. All of this could not continue indefinitely. Eventually, Brittany left him and contacted the police. Like all the previous women in this period, he actively bombarded her with compromising messages and stalked her wherever he could. She reported all of this to law enforcement, who took the case seriously. On May 11, Brittany sent a text message to Paul, warning him not to stalk her anymore and not to try to contact her through any means of communication. Then Paul sent 2 more letters demanding payment in exchange for stopping his harassment. In reality, Paul earned a decent living from extort money. He was very frugal, drove an old car, and rented a tiny, modest apartment. However, in the following days, Paul still showed no signs of stopping his bullying actions. It seemed he was still trying harder to cling to his victim. During this period, he began talking about his 9 personalities. Brittany was in shock and terrified, as she had never dealt with people suffering from dissociative disorders before. Thanks to Brittany's work through social media and television, Paul was able to easily gather information about her. He followed her through news broadcasts and publications. Paul began showing up near Brittany's home and workplace uninvited, and he was able to intimidate her to the point that it became increasingly difficult for her to go on live broadcasts. During those moments, she couldn't feel calm in front of the camera because of the overwhelming fear. Thanks to the lawyer hired by Brittany, Paul was arrested and charged with stalking and extortion. Eventually, he admitted to stalking but again claimed he was insane. During this time, Brittany learned that all of his stories about twin brothers and tumors were false. His father was actually alive and well. She was shocked by the extent of his deceit. Soon after, Paul was deported to Australia and banned from entering the US. After being forcibly sent back to his home country, he changed his last name to Lambert, his mother's maiden name. This seemed to be his attempt to clear his name, which had been tarnished by legal issues. When Samantha found out about his deportation, she contacted the police because she was worried he might try to come back to her since they were still married. As a result, the police issued a restraining order against Paul from approaching her. Despite this, Paul continued to harass her with calls and messages, but she chose not to respond. On February 22, 2016, Paul persuaded Samantha to go with him to a divorce lawyer to sign the divorce papers. She agreed, which turned out to be a grave mistake. During the ride, he began to insult her and threatened to crash the car so they could die together. When Samantha asked to be let out, Paul suddenly sped up, and in the panic, he hit her in the face. Fortunately, she managed to escape from the car and call the police. Paul was subsequently arrested and charged with kidnapping and assault. They finalized their divorce on June 19 of that same year, and Paul faced a Queensland court where he was sentenced to 10 months in prison. However, he was released on parole shortly after. Following his release, he was placed on 12 months of probation and had his driver's license suspended for 2 years. A few months later, he broke the terms of his parole again by moving to another state in Australia and starting a new job without informing his parole officer. Initially, law enforcement was unaware of his actions. Each time he was supposed to check in, he flew from state to state, pretending to live his previous life. It was later discovered that he had much more serious problems than simple depression. From August 2015 to May 2016, he attended numerous therapy sessions with a psychologist. During this time, his behavioral issues also came to the attention of psychiatrists. Although Paul was prescribed several medications, he refused to take them and eventually stopped seeing the specialist altogether. Shortly after his divorce from Samantha, Paul began using his favorite dating app and quickly met a new woman. This woman was Angela J., a 28-year-old doctor who had just finished her residency and worked at a hospital in Sydney, located hundreds of kilometers away from him in another state. Angela was also looking for a life partner after her own difficult divorce. Upon meeting Paul, she felt an immediate connection. They went on their first date, followed by several more, during which Paul acted calmly to win her over. Angela noticed they had a lot in common and eventually invited him to meet her family. While she seemed genuinely happy, her father sensed something was wrong within minutes of meeting Paul. He warned his daughter that this man would bring trouble, but sadly, his warning went unheeded. Angela and Paul had an agreement. She would focus on her career and not be disturbed during the weekdays while working at the hospital, and they would meet on weekends. Initially, everything went well, but soon Angela began to feel uneasy. She sensed that someone was watching her, and discovered that someone had entered her home without permission while she was at work. Paul started to act increasingly provocatively, prompting Angela to end the relationship. When she shared this news, Paul cried and resorted to his usual tactic of threatening self-harm. When she tried to set boundaries, Paul revealed that he had a personality disorder. He escalated the situation by inventing a fake friend named Dan, buying a phone for this imaginary friend, and using Dan to manipulate Angela further, claiming that he was end his life due to her desire to break up. This made Angela feel guilty. Eventually, she agreed to spend some time with him, feeling pressured by her professional ethics as a doctor who wanted to help. Angela made it clear that she only wanted to support his recovery and did not wish to pursue a romantic relationship, which seemed to satisfy Paul. Then, Angela had invited him to a reunion, and when they met, she reiterated that they were just friends. Throughout the evening, Paul acted unpredictably, even stealing Angela's handbag with all her belongings. After several hours of persuasion from some of Angela's friends, her property was finally returned. Angela's sister came to her aid just in time and helped her escape. By morning, the sisters reached out to the police because they had received threatening messages overnight. Initially, the police did not take action, even though they were aware of multiple similar crimes committed by Paul. He had violated 5 restraining orders and the terms of his parole, along with committing various other offenses. The next day, Paul rented a white Corolla hatchback and went to a hardware store to buy a utility knife, an axe, and 2 rolls of tape. While driving, he was pulled over for speeding, but it is more of a routine document check. He was driving illegally since his license was still suspended, but he managed to convince the officer that he was unaware of the restrictions. Surprisingly, the officer let him go. That evening, Paul met Angela at her doorstep, right after she returned from visiting her sister. Once inside, Angela received a frightening message from Paul. Alarmed, Angela ran to her neighbors for help, fearing that Paul might come for her. They assisted her and called the police. Help arrived at her home around 9 p.m., and Angela was taken to the police station. After explaining the situation regarding Paul, a criminal case was opened. Following the police's advice, Angela decided to stay with her relatives for safety. She asked the landlord to change all the locks. To protect herself, she kept knives all over her house so she can quickly defend myself in case of attack. Meanwhile, Paul was near her house, hiding from the police and attempting to buy a weapon. Paul went to a weapon shop but was unable to purchase one due to his suspended license. Later, he returned and asked to buy a hunting knife, which he was given. That same day, he rented a room in a hotel directly across from the hospital where Angela worked. After that, he sent a message to the entire family saying he was going to end his life. However, his relatives, who had tried to help him for many years, were exhausted by his constant lies and stopped responding to such comments. On November 2, Paul returned to the hardware store and bought a crowbar, a hammer, and several zip ties. When Angela came home in the evening and went to her bedroom, Paul suddenly jumped out of the closet and attacked her with a knife. He covered her mouth with his hand, leaving her unable to fight back. However, Angela managed to stall him by asking to go to the bathroom. Terrified, she decided to try to escape. Unfortunately, Paul quickly caught up with her and began stabbing her. The first strikes hit her legs, followed by 11 wounds to her chest and arms. Despite her injuries, Angela somehow managed to get up. Paul then poured gasoline on her and even into her mouth, but she refused to give up and screamed for help. Fortunately, a neighbor walking his dog heard her cries. Realizing what was happening, the neighbor grabbed a crowbar from his work vehicle and rushed to her aid. Angela seized the opportunity to slip out of Paul's grasp, causing him to slip on a puddle and fall. This gave her crucial seconds to escape, and the neighbor helped her reach his house, where his wife called for help and tended to her bleeding wounds as instructed by Angela. Finally, Angela was taken to the hospital, and the police began searching for Paul. However, he had already disappeared by that time. Remarkably, around 7:05 a.m., while Angela was being transported to the hospital, Paul called her. Instead of speaking with her, he only heard the furious shouts of the neighbor who had rescued her. Paul hung up and called his mother. During this call, he told her he intended to take his own life and asked her to apologize to Angela on his behalf. She didn't believe him and hung up. He then called the police, speaking about harming all the women he had known. He claimed he couldn't control himself and that they would be in danger as long as he was alive. The police tried to convince him to turn himself in, but he simply hung up. Thanks to this call, the police were able to track Paul's location. He was traveling along the eastern coast of Australia. A chase began at 9:15, but Paul was driving so recklessly that the police had to stop the pursuit. They set up spike strips on the road, which successfully halted his vehicle. Paul exited the rented car with a knife and ran down the road until he encountered 3 officers. Although the officers had their weapons drawn, Paul showed no intention of surrendering. He was blinded by a powerful flashlight, which only made him more aggressive. Meanwhile, the police attempted to negotiate with him, urging him to give up, but he seemed intent on dying. Paul even shouted, asking what he needed to do for the officers to open fire. They attempted to calm and distract him, but one of the police officers approached from behind and fired a taser. Unfortunately, the taser failed to make contact because Paul was wearing thick clothing. This infuriated Paul, who then menaced the officers with a knife. Suddenly, multiple explosions rang out from all directions. At 9:37, 36-year-old Paul was shot and killed. His wife was informed of the incident, but she was unable to cry or feel upset. Angela was in the hospital at the time. She had been saved and was not in danger of losing her life despite suffering 11 stab wounds. Upon hearing that Paul could no longer harm anyone, Angela felt a sense of relief. Many women who had been victims of stalking experienced varying degrees of depression and post-traumatic stress, but ultimately, they all managed to rehabilitate and recover. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, The Case of Tony Alexander King. Rocio Juaninkov Hornos was born in 1979 in Spain and was the youngest of 3 siblings. Their parents divorced when Rocio was very young, and the children remained with their mother. Her mother, Alicia Hornos, raised her and her 2 older siblings, Rosa and Guillermo, in the town of Millas. Rocio was described as an angelic child. She had a positive outlook on life and was adept at finding solutions to challenges. She cared deeply for her mother and siblings. At that time, Rocio was also in a relationship with a boy who, according to many, loved her very much. However, everything changed on October 9, 1999. That day, Rocio spent the day and evening at her boyfriend's house, where his mother was also present. They decided to go to a fair in Fuengirola, a nearby village. Later that evening, around 9:30 p.m., Rocio chose to leave her boyfriend's house, saying she wanted to go home to shower and change before going to the fair. It was only a 500-meter walk back to her house, but something happened during her walk, and she never returned home. Rocio's mother thought her daughter had gone to the fair with her boyfriend or friends, so she didn't raise the alarm when Rocio didn't come home. Rosa and Guillermo were also waiting for Rocio at home, but hadn't heard from her either. When Rocio still hadn't returned by the next morning, Alicia became anxious. Alicia called Rocio's boyfriend. He said he hadn't seen Rocio and confirmed that they had planned to go to the fair, but that at the last moment, he fell asleep and didn't go anywhere. He mentioned that he had tried to call Rocio, but acquaintances said they hadn't seen her at the fair. He thought she had come home late and was very tired. Alicia was very worried because there had been no news about her daughter. Her anxiety grew until her partner Juan Chirillo suggested they take a walk to relieve some stress. He planned to show her some nearby ruins, hoping it would help her relax. Many people had reassured them that their daughter would return soon. As they walked, everything seemed normal, until Alicia spotted a pair of sneakers on the ground. She believed they belonged to her daughter. Continuing through the vacant lot, she became increasingly alarmed when she saw bloodstains and a piece of fabric. Feeling agitated, Alicia was convinced that something terrible had happened, so Juan called the police for assistance. The police arrived and secured the area to search for evidence. In addition to the sneakers, bloodstains, and fabric, they discovered tire tracks that had crossed over a puddle of blood, as well as a cigarette butt from a brand not commonly found in Spain. After analyzing the evidence, they found that the DNA from the cigarette butt did not match any records in the database, but they preserved the sample for future testing. The tire tracks indicated that the car involved was quite old and had not been made in Spain for 6 years. It was also determined to be a small vehicle. Since Rocio had practically vanished in the middle of the night, it was very difficult to find witnesses, especially since the area was not crowded. However, the first witness came forward after the evidence was collected. He was a taxi driver who reported that on the night of Rocio's disappearance, around 10 p.m., he was driving home from work and passed by the street where the evidence was found. He heard screams and became very scared, so he closed the windows of his car. The taxi driver also noticed a man inside an SUV and was able to provide a description of the man, which was used to create a composite sketch. The photo sketch was disseminated across all media outlets, so that people could provide information about this man if they knew anything. At the same time, the police were searching for this person in the nearby grove. In cases like this, the last person to see the victim, especially if they were a romantic partner, often becomes the main suspect. In this instance, that person was Jose Antonio Rios. The police examined his phone and interrogated him 6 times. His account raised suspicions for several reasons, one being that he couldn't recall what the victim was wearing that day. The victim's family provided information that contradicted Jose's statements. They stated that she was wearing a white t-shirt with a Nike logo and purple pants, but Jose insisted he had never seen her in that outfit. He claimed he was unfamiliar with the white t-shirt. Additionally, Jose's mother confirmed that the victim had been wearing a jacket when she left their house at 9:30 p.m. and she had helped fasten it on her. Jose's family was taken aback to find that the jacket was still at their home, suggesting that Rocio must have returned to Jose's house in different clothing that day. Jose insisted on his original account. When Rocio went her home, he fell asleep and he didn't know anything else. The location where the evidence was discovered was very close to Jose's house. If the girl had been screaming, as the taxi driver stated, Jose should have heard her since he lived on the lower floor. He claimed he didn't hear anything, and neither did his family. There was no way to verify his alibi as he claimed to have been sleeping at home. Only his parents and a few relatives could confirm that. It was also odd that he didn't offer to take his girlfriend home at such a late hour, even though they could have gone to the fair together. No suspicious calls were found on his phone, leading the investigators to halt further questioning. He appeared in various media outlets to talk about Rocio, expressing hope for her return and participating in the search efforts. The search for Rocio included all nearby areas, with the central zone being where the evidence was found. Alicia suspected that the attack might have occurred there, and there were concerns that Rocio could be seriously injured or even dead. They searched within a 75-kilometer radius of the location where the evidence was discovered. Alicia appeared on television, pleading for assistance in finding her daughter. In her desperation, Alicia consulted several mediums, all of whom claimed that her daughter was still alive. The search continued tirelessly until November 2, 1999. Unfortunately, that day ended in tragedy when police and family members discovered Rocio. She was found deceased near Los Altos del Rodeo Sports Club. The property included a lot with a tennis court, where Rocio's body was located. She was found under a tree by the owners of the court. Rocio was naked and had sustained stab wounds, burns, and significant damage to her body from lying beneath the tree for an extended period. The level of decomposition was so advanced that her identity could not be determined through physical features, and she was ultimately recognized by the jewelry she had been wearing that day. The autopsy determined that Rocio died on the same day she went missing. She had 9 stab wounds in various areas of her body, with marks from the weapon on her bones. Her throat had also been cut. 2 tied garbage bags were found near her body, suggesting that she had been transported to the location by car. These bags likely served to prevent blood from staining the trunk. The investigators believed that the perpetrator did not leave her there on the day of her disappearance, but rather several days later. Investigators discovered a badge next to the body. However, the badge had no name on it and therefore provided no useful information. The autopsy revealed that all 9 stab wounds were made with the same weapon, likely a pocket knife. 8 of these wounds were clustered on her back, indicating that she might have been unconscious or already dead when they were inflicted. The remaining wound on her front, like the 8 on her back, affected vital organs and contributed to her death. Additionally, pink fabric fibers were found at the scene. Besides, another bag was discovered at the crime scene containing her clothing. This bag held a hair that did not belong to Rocio, as it was dark, while she had blonde hair. Although this bag, along with the badge and fabric fibers found on the body, could have aided investigators, they were not useful at that time. The hair was rootless, and the technology then available could not analyze DNA without a root. The fabric fibers, identified as clothing fibers, could not be analyzed either. They needed to be compared with the suspect's clothing, and the samples would have to match exactly for the evidence to be significant. The only helpful item for the police was the clothing found in the bag, including a well-known white t-shirt. This t-shirt had traces that supported the theory that Rocio died from stab wounds and confirmed the number of wounds inflicted. A few weeks prior, 4 police officers noticed a car with multiple passengers while patrolling the area where Rocio later went missing. When they checking the license plate, they found that the car belonged to Dolores Vasquez. Dolores and Alicia have been in a romantic lesbian relationship for 10 years. Initially, their relationship was happy, and they bought a house where they lived with Alicia's children. However, issues arose as the children grew older. Dolores took on the role of disciplinarian and was much stricter than Alicia preferred. Dolores often criticized and punished the children severely, leading to frequent arguments between the couple. Ultimately, they decided to separate because their relationship had become unhappy. Even after the separation and Alicia moving out of their shared home, Dolores remained a significant figure in her life. Alicia, Rocio's mother, lacked higher education and struggled to find a well-paying job, which led to financial challenges for the family. Meanwhile, Dolores held a high-status job and provided substantial financial support to them. She often expressed her love for Alicia's children as if they were her own, particularly for Rocio, whom she practically raised. Dolores was instrumental in the efforts to find Rocio and also contributed financially to the investigation. As the investigation progressed, the police initially had several suspects, but that number gradually decreased. Almost a year after Rocio's death, in September 2000, the first arrest occurred. Dolores was taken into custody as the sole suspect. Dolores's arrest was initially controversial, as the police had no clear evidence linking her to the crime. Some initial clues led them to suspect that the real culprit might be a man, as suggested by a sketch provided by the only witness, a taxi driver. However, the police focused on Dolores, believing that she was motivated by a recent breakup with Alicia Hornos, Rocio's mother. They suspected that Dolores may have acted out of resentment. There were even rumors that Rocio played a role in the breakup, as her relationship with Dolores was said to be strained. These assumptions became the justification for Dolores's arrest. After the detention, one of Spain's most publicized and controversial trials began. Dolores was interrogated for several hours, but consistently maintained her innocence. Earlier, evidence suggesting her involvement had emerged. Pink fabric fibers found on Rocio's body were compared to Dolores's athletic clothing. Laboratory analysis indicated a near-perfect match, confirming that the fibers came from Dolores's clothing. This initial analysis was conducted by a toxicological laboratory, and the police announced the findings at a press conference, leading to a shift in public opinion against Dolores. However, at her attorney's request, a second analysis was conducted at a forensic laboratory. This time, the result was negative. Dolores's defense argued that the initial laboratory might have made an error. The case received widespread media coverage, and everyone had something to say about the actual findings of the police or Dolores's family life. Discussions arose suggesting that Dolores harbored deep-seated resentment towards Rocio. The trial commenced in 2001, and multiple testimonies revealed a very strained relationship between Dolores and Rocio. Alicia testified that Dolores often punished Rocio harshly, restricted her from leaving the house for many years, and frequently yelled at her. As a result, Rocio struggled academically, leading to further reprimands from Dolores, intensifying their conflicts. Alicia recalled a specific moment when Rocio expressed her fears, saying, "Mom, one day she is going to kill me, and you will do nothing." Rosa also shared her experiences of humiliation at the hands of Dolores. Initially, this behavior stemmed from Dolores's education. Unlike Alicia, who could read and write but had no formal qualifications, Dolores's education set her apart. Dolores often introduced Alicia as her sister to friends and acquaintances, rarely acknowledging her as a partner to anyone outside their close circle. This led Alicia to feel that Dolores no longer loved her or her family. A few months prior to the incident, Dolores had threatened Alicia because she refused to rekindle their relationship. Alicia was already with someone else. Alicia told Dolores that their romantic involvement was over, but Alicia was open to being friends and would offer help if needed. In response, she ominously warned Alicia, "You will cry bloody tears. You will be in pain." However, there was no evidence to show that Dolores was physically at the crime scene or had approached Rocio's body. The available evidence may suggest the guilt of someone else, rather than that of Dolores. Despite this, she was labeled guilty based on the evidence presented in court. The police suspected that Rocio knew her attacker. They believed this individual had given her a cloth to use on her wound after inflicting the first injury to the front of her body. However, when Rocio attempted to escape, the attacker, in a fit of rage, inflicted additional wounds to her back. The numerous wounds indicated a level of hatred and cruelty. One piece of evidence was a badge. Dolores participated in the searches, so she could have had access to these badges. Additionally, the testimonies of Dolores's employees came into play, indicating that Dolores was anxious and irritable on the days surrounding Rocio's disappearance. One employee reported that on the day Rocio's body was found, Dolores took a picture of her and began stabbing it with a knife, ultimately destroying the photo. Dolores claimed this was because the employee's Spanish was poor and she wanted to explain what had happened to Rocio. Meanwhile, the police have not released information about how Rocio was killed. An employee reported that on the day of the incident, Dolores shouted about a problem. Another piece of evidence against Dolores is that she usually took daily walks with a friend from Ukraine between 9 and 10 o'clock in the evening. However, on the day Rocio disappeared, Dolores did not meet with her friend and canceled their plans. Additionally, it was discovered that Dolores's phone was tapped, revealing a conversation in which she stated, "They have nothing." The police questioned her friends and family, prompting many to contact Dolores to check on her and ask what to say to the authorities. It became clear to the police that Dolores was confident she would not be caught, believing they had no evidence against her. However, Dolores's defense countered each point made by the prosecution. They presented a record of Dolores's phone calls from that day, both of which were lengthy. If she made her first call at 22:34 and the taxi driver heard Rocio scream around 10 p.m., it would have been impossible for Dolores to arrive, commit the murder, dispose of the body, and then make those calls in such a short time frame. Furthermore, when Dolores called her friends and family, none reported that she seemed nervous or acted unusually. Everything appeared normal. As a result, some evidence was dismissed. The defense also aimed to disprove the significance of a tire track found at the scene. The track belonged to an old car, while Dolores drove a newer Toyota with different tires. The prosecution suggested that Dolores could have rented a car, but this was deemed unlikely. Where could she have rented a car at 10 or 11 p.m.? Rental services would have logged such an unusual request, yet the prosecution had no proof that Dolores rented a vehicle. There was also a theory that she borrowed a car from a neighbor who left their keys in the car, but this idea was considered too far-fetched to be taken seriously. The DNA found on the cigarette butt belonged to a man. The taxi driver testified that he saw a man near the garbage bags containing Rocio's body. Fingerprints on the bags did not match those of Dolores, meaning there was no evidence to prove she was at the crime scene. The only accusation against her was a possible desire for revenge. Additionally, Dolores was known to be psychologically unstable, unfriendly, and often in a bad mood. This was a jury trial. The verdict was delivered not by the judge, but by the jury. The jury was composed of 9 members who deliberated for several hours. The decision was not unanimous, reflecting 7 votes in favor and 2 against. A few months into the trial, Dolores was found guilty of intentionally murdering Rocio Wannenkoff and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Here's what the police believe happened on October 9, 1999. Around 9:30 p.m., Rocio left her boyfriend's house to go home, intending to take a shower and change. While walking home, she encountered Dolores. They began to argue and the situation escalated. Dolores pulled out a knife and stabbed Rocio in the front. After injuring Rocio, Dolores nervously handed her a handkerchief to stop the bleeding. Fearing that Rocio would report her to the police, Dolores chased after her when she tried to flee. Rocio, weakened by her injuries, fell, and Dolores then stabbed her 8 more times. After confirming that Rocio was dead, Dolores placed her body in her car. To keep the interior clean, she wrapped the body in 2 plastic bags. For several days, she concealed the body while participating in the search for Rocio and giving interviews. Eventually, she moved the body to the location where it was later discovered. Dolores initially served her prison sentence, but in 2002, an appeal was filed on her behalf. The appeal was successful, leading to a new trial being scheduled. While Dolores awaited her second trial, both the defense and prosecution prepared to present new evidence. However, an unexpected event caused the trial to be postponed. In August 2003, a 17-year-old girl named Sonia Carabantes went missing from her village after the holidays. Sonia and her family had moved to Malaga after living in Switzerland for a while. As days passed without any news about Sonia, the police worked diligently to locate her. This situation reminded many people of the case of Rocio, as both girls were of similar ages and had similar builds. Tragically, Sonia's fate mirrored that of Rocio. On August 19, 2003, Sonia's body was discovered. She had been strangled and had multiple stab wounds. 2 days after the body was found, on August 21, an autopsy was conducted. During the examination, genetic material was discovered under the victim's nails. This material was identified as skin, indicating that the girl had struggled with her attacker. This evidence could help the police identify the murderer. A DNA sample was taken, analyzed, and entered into the database. The DNA under Sonia's nails matched 100% with DNA found on cigarette butts, linked to Dolores Vasquez from a few years prior. This was puzzling because the person suspected of killing Sonia was already in prison. This means that it is clear that someone else killed both girls. This information was beneficial for Dolores's defense, essentially clearing her of all charges. As a result, there was an increasing belief that Dolores was innocent. One woman stated that her ex-husband, Tony Alexander King, had been acting suspiciously around the time of Rocio's disappearance. She mentioned that he had scratches on his hands were swollen, and he brought home bloody clothes, claiming he had been injured in an accident. On the day Sonia disappeared, Tony visited her in a state of agitation, sweating, and with scratches on his body. When she asked him what had happened, he told her he had gotten into a fight outside a bar, but she found his explanation unconvincing. Tony was a British man living in Spain, near where the crimes took place. At the time, he was going through a divorce and had a child. The type of cigarettes found at the crime scene was Tony's favorite brand, which is rare in Spain. Tony was arrested on September 19, 2003. During the investigation, his DNA was collected, and the results confirmed a match with a cigarette butt and a sample found under Sonia's nails. After his arrest, details about his troubled past surfaced. Tony Alexander King, originally named Anthony Bromwich, was born in 1967. In 1986, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison for attacking several women. Additionally, he had been previously arrested for armed robbery. He served only half of his sentence before being released early for good behavior. Following his release, he changed his name and moved to Spain to start anew. In Spain, he met a woman named Cecilia Matilde Pantoja, and they had a daughter together, also named Sabrina. The Rocio family suspected that even if Dolores didn't commit the crime herself, she was somehow involved. They attended the court hearings for Tony. In 2005, Tony Alexander King was sentenced to 36 years in prison for the death of Sonia Carabantes, and an additional 7 years for an unrelated abuse assault he committed. The trial of Tony Alexander King in connection with the murder of Rocio Waninkoff, which took place in 2006. Initially, Tony claimed he had burned Rocio's body, which contradicted the official account. Although Rocio's body showed signs of burns and fire damage, it was not completely incinerated as Tony had stated. However, during the trial, Tony changed his story completely. He accused 2 individuals, Robert and Dolores, of being involved in the crime. He mentioned that he did not know Dolores well, but that they had a mutual friend, Robert. Tony explained that on October 9, 1999, he went to Robert's house to drink and do banned substance. After a while, he started feeling sick, and then Dolores arrived with another man. He alleged that Robert hypnotized him, and the next thing he remembered was sitting in a car with Robert and Dolores. Tony claimed that in the shadows of the car, Dolores attacked Rocio from behind. He said they placed Rocio in the trunk without realizing Rocio was still alive. Later, Robert got out of the car to check on Rocio. They then wrapped the body in bags to prevent any stains in the car. Tony insisted that he had minimal involvement and portrayed himself as merely a witness to a terrible crime. He is claiming that he left a cigarette butt at the scene. In the second trial, the defense pointed out that the car found at the crime scene was not Tony's car. There was an emerging belief that Tony was not acting alone. When asked why he had not mentioned this during his police arrest, he stated that Dolores had threatened to kill his daughter if he spoke up. On December 14, 2006, the trial ended, and the jury took 13 hours to deliberate. Tony King was convicted of the intentional murder of Rocio, while all charges against Robert were dismissed. Tony was sentenced to 19 years in prison and ordered to pay 2 compensations, 200,000 euros to Rocio's mother and 42,000 euros to her brother and sister. Dolores was released due to the lack of evidence to convict her for her involvement in Rocio's murder. This was a new version of the crime. One night, Tony approached a girl walking home and began to assault and intimidate her. He grabbed her by the neck and pushed her to the location where the evidence was later found. The girl fought back, and he stabbed her in the chest. During the struggle, Rocio managed to unmask him and attempted to flee, but he realized he had gone too far. None of his previous victims had escaped or sustained such severe injuries. After Rocio collapsed, he repeatedly stabbed her in the back until she was no longer breathing. He left her body there for several hours before returning in a car. It is believed that he had the accomplice who helped him load the body into the vehicle. For several days he kept the body with him before disposing of it where it was ultimately found. After the trial, Dolores moved to London and was granted compensation for the months she spent in prison. Many believe that the case cannot be considered closed, as there are still people who assisted Tony. Some think that those individuals could have included Dolores. The families of Rocio and Sonia suffered the loss of daughters who can never return. This case is quite complex, with many developments, particularly in Rocio's case. It remains uncertain whether a single DNA sample found on a cigarette butt was sufficient to place all the blame on Tony. Meanwhile, the Rocio family believes that Dolores played a role in the crime, even if she did not directly kill Rocio. The first test suggested that fibers from Dolores's clothing were found, but a subsequent test contradicted that finding. There is no concrete evidence against her. Unfortunately, without solid evidence, we can only theorize. Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case, the case of Matthew Terry. A woman called 911 from Lithia, a suburb of Tampa, Florida. She reported hearing screams from a nearby house and discovered an injured woman with a severe neck wound, bleeding heavily and struggling to breathe. It seemed that the attacker may have escaped into the woods upon hearing someone approaching the house. To start, let's get to know Kay Baker, a resident of Lithia, Florida, where she lives with her two sons. Kay Baker, 43, is a third-grade math and science teacher at Cypress Creek Elementary School in Ruskin. On the night of May 28, 2022, which was a quiet and warm evening, her neighbors, Jonathan, was sleeping peacefully on his sofa while his wife and children were also fast asleep. Shortly after midnight, Jonathan was startled awake by sounds that he later described as a scream, the sound of someone falling to the floor, and the sound of someone choking. Initially, he thought one of his daughters had fallen out of bed, so he went upstairs to check, only to find that everyone was still fast asleep. Jonathan decided to investigate the sounds outside and discovered a woman lying face down in his front yard. This woman was later identified as Kay Baker. She was in a pool of blood that appeared to be coming from her neck. While Jonathan checked on her, he heard a noise behind him. He turned to look toward the rustling in the woods behind his house but saw nothing. He then asked his wife, Ruth Figgins, to call 911. Unfortunately, by the time rescue workers and deputies from the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office arrived, Kay had already died. Medical examiners at the scene found multiple stab wounds on her shoulders and neck. The cut on her neck was so severe that detectives believed the attacker intended to behead her, describing it in their reports as almost decapitated. The police searched the area around Kay's house and spotted a gray Ford Focus parked in the driveway. They checked the license plates and confirmed that the car belonged to Matthew Terry. One of the windows in Kay's house was open, and its screen had been removed. This window was in a room used by one of Kay's sons, but neither son was home that night. The window faced the Jonathan's house. A right turn from the window led to the neighbor's front yard where Kay was found, while a left turn led to the backyard, which had drops of blood. Detectives quickly secured a search warrant to enter Kay's house. Inside, they noticed that one knife was missing from the kitchen's meat-cutting set, and a mobile phone was still there. The missing knife was a bird's beak, named for its shape and used for peeling vegetables. The bathroom door frame showed significant damage, suggesting that someone had forcefully broken into the master bedroom, where more recent evidence was also found. Signs of a break-in were evident on the nightstand, where another mobile phone was discovered. They then called in a handler with a dog to track a scent. After some time, the dog led a sheriff's deputy to a wooded area where they found a patch of grass soaked with blood. Realizing the perpetrator might be nearby, the authorities decided to bring in another canine unit with a Belgian Malinois, known for its ability to apprehend criminals. The sheriff's deputies took the dog to the blood site and warned that they would release the dog if anyone was hiding, and did not come out. Shortly after, the dog began barking and tried to rush forward. The police soon discovered Matthew hiding in tall grass and bushes. He was only wearing a t-shirt and underwear, and his clothes were covered in blood. Matthew had injuries on his neck and struggled to walk. After a struggle, the police stopped the pursuit, and he was arrested on a charge of first-degree murder. May 27, 2022, marked the end of the school year, providing a perfect reason to celebrate. That evening, Kay went to a grill bar with her boyfriend, 47-year-old Matthew Terry. While at the bar, they both got up to use the restroom. Kay returned first and accidentally bumped into her friend Kelly Andrews. Overjoyed to see each other unexpectedly, Kay started dancing happily. As Kay danced, a man neither she nor Kelly knew walked by and made a joke about their celebration. This interaction lasted about 4 seconds and occurred just as Matthew was coming out of the restroom. Matthew assumed that Kay was dancing with another man. At the bar, he confronted Kay, angrily accusing her of dancing with a stranger. Kelly and other regular customers overheard their argument. After that, Matthew and Kay left the bar and headed home. It was around 11:30 p.m., and the drive would take over an hour, during which Matthew continued to argue about the dancing. Frustrated, Kay called Kelly and asked her to clarify that she had not danced with the stranger. Kelly then told Matthew to stop being unreasonable. After the phone call, Kay texted her friend to say she was okay. About 30 minutes later, Kay was found in Jonathan's yard, covered in blood. Investigators believe that Matthew was trying to kill Kay. In a drunken rage, he reportedly stabbed her multiple times and attempted to cut her throat. Kay managed to escape through a window and ran into her neighbor's yard. It's important to note that Kay was not Matthew's first victim. He had a history of violence against women. Matthew had been in a relationship with Michelle Rogers. They met in 2015 through a mobile app while both living in Michigan, where Michelle was with her 5-year-old son. After a brief acquaintance and several months of dating, Michelle decided she wanted to end the relationship until she found out she was pregnant. For the sake of the child, she thought it was best to reconcile with Matthew, and after some time, they began living together. However, Michelle quickly became evident that Matthew was a violent person, and his behavior worsened when he was drunk. One time, he threw a cast iron skillet at Michelle while she was holding their young son. On another occasion, Matthew picked up her cat and threw it against the wall. At night, when he was angry and drunk, Matthew would show up at their apartment and knock on her door, claiming he knew she was sleeping with another man and demanding to be let in. Once, he told one of his colleagues that he wanted to beat Michelle up. The colleague took Matthew's speech as a way for him to vent and didn't think much of it. Several months later, on March 17, 2017, it became evident how serious Matthew's threats were. That day, he went bar hopping with a few friends. By around 6 p.m., Michelle decided to go find Matthew, who was at a nearby bar. When she found him, he was noticeably drunk, slurring his speech and stumbling. Frustrated that he had gotten so intoxicated, Michelle left him at the bar and went home by herself. Around 8 p.m., Matthew knocked on the back door and she let him in. He was very drunk, unable to stand or walk properly, and appeared upset, bordering on angry. After letting him in, Michelle returned to the couch where she had been sitting before. Meanwhile, Matthew went to the kitchen and seemed to be preparing a sandwich. From the couch, Michelle could easily see him as the kitchen and living room were quite open. Michelle was sitting on the couch watching TV when Matthew suddenly appeared from behind and approached her quickly and aggressively. Startled, she asked, "What are you doing? Oh my God, what are you doing?" Without responding, Matthew began to push her toward the front. In that moment, they both fell to the floor. While they were on the floor, Matthew tried to restrain Michelle and continued to hit her. As they struggled, Michelle attempted to break free and in a moment of desperation, screamed that she loved him and asked why he was doing this. Matthew responded coldly, saying, "You don't need to say anything to me. I am just going to kill you. I'm going to beat it out of you." Michelle continued to fight back and managed to get to her feet. However, Matthew struck her in the face multiple times with great force, knocking her down to the floor again. Despite her efforts to rise, Matthew jumped on her, using his full weight to keep her down. Her hand slipped on the blood-slicked floor, and it seemed she had a broken nose. Matthew then grabbed Michelle by the head and slammed it against the floor. Each time he did this, she felt darkness closing in around her, fearing he would knock her out. Michelle was in a state of confusion, thinking, "Is this really happening?" Her head was spinning, and she could hear shuffling noises coming from the kitchen. Suddenly, she felt Matthew approach from behind and stab her in the neck with a knife. Summoning her last bit of strength, Michelle managed to break free for a moment and noticed a door leading to the garage behind her. so Michelle was able to run to it and press the opener with her left hand to try to open the door and escape. The garage door began to open, but it was moving slowly, and she knew she couldn't crawl under it before Matthew reached her again. As she waited for the door to open wide enough, Matthew lunged at her once more, trying to stop her from leaving. They both fell to the ground, and by that time, the garage door had lifted enough for them to roll out onto the driveway. They rolled a bit on the driveway, revealing that Michelle was lying beneath Matthew. He was furious and had both hands on her head, striking it repeatedly against the cement. He still had the knife and stabbed her 3 times in the right shoulder. Throughout this, Michelle screamed for help. At one point, she heard voices from across the street saying, "Leave her alone." But later she couldn't tell who was speaking or what they were discussing. When Matthew lowered the knife, Michelle grabbed the blade and pulled it toward herself. At that moment, Matthew relaxed his grip, causing the knife to fall to Michelle's next side. She hoped that without the knife, he would stop fighting, but he continued to struggle to get it back and kept hitting her head against the road. Matthew started biting Michelle, targeting her shoulder and then her left cheek twice in an attempt to make her release the knife. During the struggle, Michelle screamed for help, pleading with him to stop. Eventually, a neighbor called 911. When Matthew heard the sirens approaching, he released Michelle and ran back into the house. Michelle got up and seized the knife to prevent him from taking it back. Blinded by blood filling her contact lenses, she hurried across the street, following the directions of neighbors who were guiding her with their voices. As soon as Michelle crossed the street, she collapsed in her neighbor's yard. The police discovered Michelle lying in the yard after she had been attacked, suffering from bites, bruises, and multiple stab wounds. Fortunately, she survived but spent 5 challenging days in intensive care before she began to recover. Matthew faced attempted murder charges for his violent actions against Michelle. After his arrest, he reached out to an old friend, Kay Baker, to testify in his defense. Kay, who had dated Matthew nearly 20 years prior, eagerly agreed to support him in court. She informed the jurors that Matthew was honest and could be completely trusted. Michelle desperately tried to make Kay see the monster that Matthew actually was. During the trial, Michelle sent Kay photos of her stab wounds and wrote, "Please don't let this happen to you." But Kay saw in Matthew the man she had known back in those days 20 years ago when they were dating. She wasn't alone in her defense of him. Many of Matthew's friends and family were present in the courtroom, supporting him and shaking their heads in disbelief as they listened to Michelle's testimony. Matthew's lawyer managed to persuade the jurors that Matthew's attack on Michelle was an act of self-defense. The lawyer argued that, as a former Marine, Matthew was using his training to defuse a fight that Michelle had started. Ultimately, Matthew was sentenced to serve 3 to 10 years in prison for assault with intent to cause serious bodily harm. In a letter to the Michigan Parole Board, Michelle expressed her fear for herself, her family, and potential future victims, stating, "If he gets out, I am afraid for myself and my family as well as for the next victim. Society is in danger." Unfortunately, her concerns were ignored, and he served only 3 years before being released for good behavior, having also completed psychotherapy. During his time in prison, Matthew maintained contact with Kay, and after his release, he moved to Florida to start a new life with her. Back to the Kay murder case, Matthew claimed he was not guilty of Kay's murder. However, prosecutors believe that he killed her in a fit of jealousy, because he thought she was dancing with another man while they were at a bar. After Kay's murder, an investigator who was part of the team investigating the crime scene following Matthew's attack on Michelle told the press that Matthew Terry was a self-absorbed, manipulative murderer. The trial began in November 2022. Prosecutors worked tirelessly to convince the jurors that Matthew was responsible for Kay Baker's death and sought the death penalty for him. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Raynella Dossett Leith. Raynella Dossett Leith was born on October 25, 1948 in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, a small isolated town originally established for workers at the nearby nuclear power plant. Her parents worked at the plant, and because the town was isolated, it was safer than many other American cities. Children were free to play outside. Raynella was a bright student and did well in school. She successfully enrolled at East Tennessee State University in Knoxville, where she studied nursing. There, she met a very ambitious young man named Ed Dossett, who aspired to become a corporate executive or start his own business, and even had political ambitions. He was a quiet, friendly young man, and they both grew up in rural Tennessee. In 1970, the young couple got married and moved to the suburbs of Knoxville. Ed Dossett owned a large old family farm that they renovated with the help of contractors, turning it into the perfect home. After graduating from college, Raynella began working as a nurse at a local hospital and worked her way up to the position of senior nurse. By 1975, she had completed her law degree and begun a successful legal career. In 1978, when the Knoxville County Attorney General retired, Ed Dossett ran for the position and was elected. Raynella played a major role in his success, as he credited much of it to her support. In 1978, the couple welcomed their first daughter. In 1983, they had a son, followed by another daughter in 1985. After learning that she was pregnant with her first child, Raynella decided to quit her job and become a full-time housewife, as her husband had a good income, and she also helped with the farm work. During this time, Ed Dossett served as the Knoxville County Attorney and worked with a secretary named Kay Clift Walker, with whom he had a secret affair. Although Kay had a family of her own, they still spent weekends and holidays together. When Kay became pregnant, she had to quit her job due to her increased responsibilities, but her intimate encounters with Ed Dossett continued. In such a conservative county, having an extramarital relationship was unacceptable for a public servant. Ed Dossett and Kay chose to end their affair to avoid damaging their reputations. However, the situation was more complicated than it seemed. Those who knew Raynella recognized her as a controlling and powerful person. People often did not enjoy interacting with her, let alone befriending her. Ed Dossett's close friends and family knew that his marital problems began soon after they got married, largely due to Raynella's desire to control every aspect of their lives. Many later understood why Ed Dossett decided to leave. During a meeting, Ed Dossett began to experience severe stomach pain. His assistant noticed that he was constantly holding his stomach and seemed unwell. When asked about his health, Ed Dossett expressed that he believed his wife was trying to harm him, implying that she was poisoning his food. However, when offered help, he insisted that he could handle it on his own. By September 1991, his condition had worsened to the point that he had to be hospitalized. Although he was skeptical of his wife's intentions, he later revealed that these fears were unfounded. Doctors performed a series of tests and discovered a malignant tumor in his small intestine and liver. Unfortunately, the cancer was already at an advanced stage, with metastases spreading to nearby organs in the abdominal cavity. Ed Dossett returned home anxiously and shared his diagnosis with Raynella. He later confided to family members that she responded calmly to the news but chose not to discuss the illness. She believed it was better to keep the situation private, thinking it would allow her husband to continue working for as long as possible. She felt that staying active would help prolong his life, and secretly hoped for a miracle that would aid in his recovery. Those who knew Raynella well speculated that her motives were financial, believing she pushed him to work until the end to maintain a steady income. By March 1992, Ed Dossett's health had declined significantly, and it was clear he was losing the battle against his illness. During this time, he wanted his family close, so he contacted loved ones, including his cousin, with whom he had a close relationship until the end of his life. The cousin lived in another state and drove over 700 kilometers to visit Ed Dossett. Raynella refused to let his cousin into the house, leaving him no choice but to leave. That evening, Raynella wrote a letter explaining her actions, claiming that Ed Dossett's serious condition made it impossible for him to receive visitors anymore, and that his appearance might scare them. However, no one found this explanation convincing. Just a few days later, Ed Dossett himself asked his family to visit him one last time, indicating that he did not care about his appearance. The next day, Raynella insisted that Ed Dossett return to work. Despite being in excruciating pain and barely able to move, Ed chose to follow his wife's wishes and continue working until the very end. After only one day of work, he was forced to stop. Now bedridden, Ed Dossett was on near constant morphine to manage his unbearable pain, and doctors estimated he had only a few weeks to live. No one expected anything unusual to happen to Ed Dossett, who was in critical condition and required medical assistance to stay alive. On the morning of July 9, a 911 call was received requesting police and paramedics to Raynella's home for assistance. When the police arrived, they found Raynella in a panic, running around the body of Ed Dossett, who was lying on the ground. Raynella explained that her husband had gone out to check on their cattle. After a while, she heard noises indicating that the cattle were agitated. She tried to call out to Ed Dossett, but there was no response. Fearing he had been trampled by the frightened animals, she grabbed her pistol and fired several shots into the air to scare them away. Initially, the police believed the incident to be an accident. Raynella was taken to the police station for standard questioning. However, as the conversation progressed, her account of her husband's death began to raise suspicions. During the questioning, the police learned that Ed Dossett had a serious illness and had suddenly wanted to check on the cattle, which seemed odd given his poor health and difficulty walking. The police were puzzled as to why Raynella had allowed him to go alone to the herd in such a weakened state, and why she had shown no concern when he took so long to return. Raynella remained in the house until she heard a loud noise, at which point she discovered her husband lying on the ground. Ed Dossett had been trampled and was covered in scratches and hoof marks. Raynella administered first aid and CPR. Having worked in a hospital, she was well versed in these techniques, but unfortunately, nothing seemed to help. As her story unfolded, more bizarre details emerged. Realizing her husband was beyond saving, she called for emergency services, but there was no response. She tried to contact the local hospital directly, but she did not remember their phone number. The police found this suspicious, as she had worked as a senior nurse at a local health center for many years and should have known the number by heart. Despite the inconsistencies, her account was considered credible. She explained that she had not been working for the organization for long and had forgotten the necessary phone numbers. She also mentioned feeling scared and shocked. Eventually, she contacted the local market director, a friend of hers, and asked him to call for help. He then reached out to the emergency services. Unfortunately, the condition of the body made it difficult to determine the cause of death at first glance, so a thorough autopsy was required. Forensic experts arrived to investigate the scene, but they found no physical evidence. Ultimately, Ed Dossett's death was ruled an accident, and the case was closed. However, the real story was just beginning. Those who knew Ed Dossett well realized that in his final days, he was barely conscious for more than a few minutes due to constant pain and required injections of morphine to relieve it. It was strange that he suddenly decided to leave the house to check on the cows. If he tried to stand, he could barely do so on his own. His legs had weakened in the last days of his life. The medical examiner found numerous internal injuries and broken bones on the man. Furthermore, there were hoof marks on his skin, which corroborated Raynella's story. Ed Dossett's relatives knew that his life insurance policy included a clause that doubled the payout if he died in an accident rather than from natural causes such as cancer. Although his wife would still receive a payout, it would be significantly less. Therefore, it was in her best interest to present her husband's death as an accident. Since the authorities classified his death as an accident, she could collect double the compensation. This is why Raynella initially tried to hide her husband's illness from the police. Ed Dossett's relatives decided to investigate the circumstances surrounding his death. Discovering inconsistencies in the case, Ed Dossett's blood had almost no morphine, which was surprising given his regular use of high doses. He had terminal cancer and could only manage his pain with large amounts of painkillers. The forensic expert confirmed that the morphine level was 0, indicating that he had not taken any medication for at least a day. However, it seemed that Ed Dossett could not move without painkillers. Despite this, the official inquest was closed. It is believed that Ed Dossett may have staged his own death, as he was nearing the end of his life and wanted to go on his own terms. Perhaps he was worried about his family and considered this his last wish. But it is difficult to understand why he did not at least take a painkiller to alleviate his suffering before staging this incident. All of this creates a confusing picture with contradictory details. At the funeral, Ed Dossett's friends confirmed their suspicions about Raynella. Eyewitnesses noted that she seemed carefree and even cheerful, which was surprising for a grieving widow. Rather than mourning her husband, she appeared to treat the event as a social gathering, mingling and chatting with guests. This behavior was especially strange given her usual rudeness toward others following her husband's death. It seemed that she had finally been relieved of the burden of caring for him. She had not worked for a long time, had received a large sum of money, and felt no need to find employment. Instead, she chose to spend most of her time with her children. However, Raynella soon grew tired of this lifestyle. She and her children began visiting a nearby swimming pool owned by a man named David Lead. David was a well-known figure in the local community. He was married and had a daughter. Raynella and David had little in common. Raynella was well-educated, while David had dropped out of school at 19 without graduating. He eventually became a hairdresser and opened his own beauty salon, gaining recognition in town. David was always proud of his appearance and underwent several cosmetic surgeries to look younger. Unfortunately, his satisfaction with his looks did not last long. One day, an accident caused a large piece of debris to hit his eye, disfiguring his face and leaving him partially blind. Since then, he has worn sunglasses. As Raynella and her children spent more time at the pool, they grew closer to David. He began an affair with Raynella, which his wife eventually discovered. She filed for divorce, but by then, David was deeply in love with Raynella and indifferent to the divorce proceedings. They quickly divorced, and in January 1993, Raynella married David. He moved to her farm just 6 months after Ed Dossett's death, which sparked new rumors and gossip in the community about her marrying her late husband's friend, especially considering the suspicious circumstances surrounding Ed Dossett's death. The situation became a real scandal. Initially, she and David ignored the questions and gossip, but eventually, the rumors died down. Soon after, she began to display her domineering and harsh personality. David's daughter, who had seen him driving his pickup truck in a bad mood, asked her father what had happened. He told her that he had argued with Raynella, but did not want to share more details. His daughter was shocked, as it was the first time she had seen him like that. In 1994, a heartbreaking tragedy struck Raynella. Her son died tragically. He and his sister had been driving with a temporary license that allowed them to drive as long as a licensed adult was present. However, that day, the boy was driving without adult supervision, lost control of the car, and crashed into an oncoming vehicle. The boy, who was not wearing a seatbelt, was thrown through the windshield and suffered serious injuries, dying before the ambulance arrived. Raynella was taken to the police station for questioning after the incident. Several witnesses stated that there were no adults in the car when the boy was driving, but Raynella claimed she was in the car with the children and that the tragic accident happened before she could react. Despite this, the police believed Raynella's story and chose not to prosecute her. If the case had been thoroughly investigated, Raynella could have faced consequences that could have prevented further events from occurring. However, her persuasive speaking skills helped her avoid further legal trouble. Following these events, divorce proceedings began between Kay Clift Walker, Ed Dossett's former secretary, and her current husband, Steve Walker. Her husband was shocked to discover that their second child with Kay was actually Ed Dossett's. Raynella, who knew about the affair, contacted Steve to discuss the situation. The day after they met, she requested another meeting to discuss important documents. Raynella invited Steve to her farm to review the documents confirming the paternity of all of Kay's children with Ed Dossett. In a shocking turn of events, Raynella pulled out a loaded pistol and began attacking Steve. Fortunately, he dodged the bullets and escaped unharmed. Steve considered calling the police for assistance, but Raynella acted first and called them herself. In a panic, she falsely claimed that Steve had brought a weapon to her home and threatened her. The police quickly discovered the truth, leading to Raynella being charged with attempted murder. After a preliminary hearing, she was released on $200,000 bail. Raynella later accepted a plea deal, which resulted in a sentence of 6 years of probation and 100 days of community service. Meanwhile, Raynella continues to research her inheritance after David's death. His daughter, who was only entitled to 10% of the estate, was supposed to inherit the house and the rest of the estate. In January 2000, David began to suffer from various health problems, including hallucinations, high cholesterol, and even a stroke. Raynella handled the situation by preventing family members from visiting David and limiting contact with his daughter and their nephew. Fortunately, David recovered and was discharged from the hospital, but his health problems forced him to quit his business. By this time, he was showing signs of dementia. During a visit to a neurologist, he vaguely recalled an incident involving suffocation with a pillow, but the neurologist dismissed it as another hallucination. On March 13, David's mother was hospitalized for cancer. Unexpectedly, Raynella visited her at the hospital and then contacted David's daughter, asking her to visit her father. She expressed that she had left a plate of food and medicine on the bedside table, but was worried that David might not finish eating. It was unclear why she suddenly became so anxious, and how she knew he had even touched the food. The call was strange because, in recent months, Raynella had done everything she could to limit David's daughter's contact with her father and prevent them from communicating. Additionally, she had never visited her mother-in-law, so her appearance at the hospital took everyone by surprise. David's daughter then went to the house to check on her father, but no one answered her phone calls or opened the door. She eventually found David with a head injury and quickly called the police. When the police arrived, they found Raynella immediately discussing her decision to end David's life. She insisted he had good reasons for this, citing his long-term battle with depression. However, David loved his daughter very much, and his mental health seemed stable because he was managing his illness well. Raynella told the police that on the day he died, she had left him food on the bedside table before visiting her mother-in-law. Before leaving, he had spoken to her and kissed her goodbye. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it, but now she realized that was his way of saying goodbye to her for the last time. Raynella claimed that David's actions constituted a voluntary departure from life, but she also mentioned that it was the first time she had seen a weapon. However, given her dubious past full of lies and contradictions, few believed her. There were some strange details in this case. At the crime scene, 3 shots were fired. The first missed, the second was fatal, and the third also missed David. Additionally, 1 shot came from a different type of weapon that was not found at the crime scene. David was wounded on the left side of his head, despite being right-handed and having lost most of his vision in his left eye due to a previous traffic accident. This suggests that he would have struggled to aim accurately at that part of his head. David's family believes that Raynella was responsible for the murder. It seemed that the Raynella might eventually be brought to justice, but she acted quickly by arranging for the cremation of her second husband, David. This move destroyed much of the evidence that could have been used in court, making it impossible to conduct a proper autopsy. David's daughter was devastated by her father's death, and even more shocked to discover that he had left her virtually nothing. Despite efforts to bring the police into the case, 3 years passed without any progress. Raynella manipulated those around her with her money and status, and she lied to the police several times. Finally, in 2006, when David's daughter realized that she could not obtain justice through government agencies, she decided to hire a private investigator. Her goal was to seek justice and prevent Raynella from gaining an undeserved inheritance from David. She was certain that her father would never do this to her. It was all a setup. Private investigators uncovered clear evidence of Raynella's guilt, leading to the reopening of the official investigation into David's death. The police finally took the evidence against Raynella seriously and thoroughly examined the cases surrounding the deaths of her 2 husbands. The toxicology report on Ed Dossett's death revealed an error. In fact, there was a dangerously high level of morphine in his system, which could have been fatal. With such a high concentration of the painkiller, he would not have been able to move, let alone care for his cows. In 2006, Raynella was charged with the murder of Ed Dossett. It became clear that his death was no accident. She had discreetly contacted a funeral home and paid for her second husband's cremation, raising suspicions that she was trying to hide the evidence. As a result, Raynella faced charges of premeditated murder. However, she portrayed herself as the victim, convincing several people in the process and manipulating the trial in her favor. Raynella did not plead guilty to the murder. She was released on $5,000 bail, and her formal trial was set for March 2009. The jury was unable to reach a unanimous decision, with only 1 juror believing she was innocent, while the others believed she had planned to kill her husband for financial gain. As a result of this impasse, the case was retried in 2010. During the retrial, experts revealed that the bullet that killed David Leith was fired from a distance of at least 30 centimeters, too far for a suicide attempt. David did not have the arm length necessary to wield a weapon at that distance. Fingerprints found on the murder weapon also suggested that the scene had been staged after the crime. Raynella visited David's mother at the hospital to establish an alibi. She tried to contact David's daughter, locate her father, and call the police. The prosecutor argued that David had been given a cocktail of drugs typically used for surgical patients, which only nurses had access to. On January 25, 2010, after 2 days of deliberations, a jury found Raynella Dossett Leith guilty of first-degree murder for David's death. She was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 50 years. Shortly after the verdict, charges related to the death of Raynella's first husband, Ed Dossett, were dismissed for reasons that remain unclear. In early 2011, it was discovered that the verdict had been entered while the judge was a drug addict, which may have influenced the outcome. On the plus side, David's will was found to be invalid because his illness had impaired his mental capacity. As a result, Half of the estate was confiscated, and Raynella returned David's assets to his daughter. Her lawyers attempted to appeal the case, but their efforts were unsuccessful. The defense continued to fight and achieved a breakthrough in January 2017, when Raynella returned to court. The prosecution argued that Raynella's murder plan fell apart when she fired the first shot, which dramatically changed the situation. The second shot was believed to be the fatal one. David's daughter testified that Raynella had been acting strangely and unusually on the day of the incident. The prosecution contended that Raynella's odd behavior was an attempt to create an alibi for herself. Steve Walker, Kay's husband, who had been attacked by Raynella earlier, also spoke at the trial. He stated that Raynella clearly intended to kill him and even shouted about her intentions. He believed that he was only saved by luck. He was furious that Raynella had escaped punishment and that she believed she could act without consequences. It appeared that Raynella picked up the weapon again and attacked her second husband. To further support her claim that David had taken his own life, the defense brought an expert into the courtroom. The defense expert demonstrated to the jury how David Leith could have fired all 3 shots. Ultimately, the judge acquitted Raynella Dossett Leith, stating that there was no evidence to prove her guilt. She noted that no blood or gunpowder residue was found on David's body, and that Raynella had an alibi for the time of his death because she was in the hospital. There was no evidence to prove that Raynella committed the crime or that she was the last person to see David alive. The defense celebrated the verdict, while the prosecution and jury were disappointed. Raynella, who has repeatedly evaded the justice system, remains free. Now 76, she lives on her farm, and no one dares to question her about the deaths of her 2 husbands. Her children support her. Unfortunately, it seems the truth about these tragic deaths will never be discovered, but many believe she was directly involved in the deaths of both husbands. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Angelica Graswald. On the evening of April 19, 2015, Angelica Graswald and Vincent Villafor went kayaking. Both enjoyed an active lifestyle and outdoor activities, with kayaking being one of their favorites. Their relationship, which had grown over the years, was strengthened by their shared passion. That day, the couple decided to kayak across the Hudson River to Bannerman Island. They enjoyed their time there, but around 7 p.m., they decided it was time to head home. However, the wind picked up on the Hudson River, creating waves about a meter high, which posed a significant challenge to their kayak. Despite the risk, Angelica and Vincent decided to turn back because they did not have the necessary equipment to stay overnight on the island. Initially, they managed to navigate the strong waves, but as they reached the other shore, Vincent's kayak began to fill with water. The situation was worsened by the fact that Vincent was not wearing a life jacket and the water was extremely cold. In April, the river had not yet warmed up, and darkness was approaching, which posed a significant risk. Vincent shouted to Angelica to call 911 as he was already in the water and struggling to stay afloat. At approximately 7:30 p.m. on April 19, 2015, Angelica called 911, sounding desperate. She explained that she was on the Hudson River with her fiancé, who had fallen into the water. She said that he did not have any life-saving equipment and that the strong winds and waves made it impossible for her to swim to him. Angelica was extremely concerned, emphasizing that Vincent was being swept away by the current and was in danger of drowning, and she urgently called for help. When rescuers arrived, Vincent was no longer visible from the shore. The rescuers were shocked that the young couple had chosen to kayak in such harsh conditions. Angelica was cold, and they helped her warm up while they began searching for Vincent. The situation appeared to be a tragic accident. Angelica sat on the shore and cried, unable to find Vincent. She was devastated by his disappearance. The couple had planned their wedding, and now their dreams of a future together seemed shattered. The police spoke to her to gather details of what had happened, but she was in shock, making it difficult for her to calm down. Vincent's relatives and friends claimed that he was extremely skilled and knew how to handle waves of all sizes. The circumstances surrounding Vincent's disappearance were so strange that several people reported the couple's relationship to the police. Their relationship had recently deteriorated, and there had been numerous reports about it. As a result, the police felt compelled to conduct a thorough investigation. However, in order to reach any firm conclusions, they needed to locate Vincent's body and his kayak. The police then interviewed Angelica again. Angelica agreed to come to the station for questioning, unaware of how much this conversation would affect her life. At 35, Angelica was an attractive woman. Originally from Latvia, she had always sought work opportunities abroad for better prospects. Although she had been married and divorced twice, she had never given up on her dream of a new life. Eventually, luck was on her side when she secured a job as a nanny in the United States. This job suited her perfectly, as Angelica was kind, caring, and calm, which allowed her to bond well with children. During this time, Angelica met Vincent, who was also twice divorced and 46 years old. Vincent had built a successful career in the construction industry and was quite wealthy. Some acquaintances believed that she was using Vincent to secure her position in the United States by marrying an American. Vincent was generous and loved to throw parties. A few weeks after they met, Angelica moved into Vincent's home in Kips Bay, New York. Their relationship quickly progressed, and they began to discuss marriage and children. While Angelica looked for a new job, Vincent worked to provide for her needs. Their life was stable until a tragic accident occurred. Vincent and Angelica attended a party with friends the day before the tragic kayaking accident. During the party, Angelica left early, saying she was not feeling well. She spent most of the evening alone and had little interaction with others. Vincent's friends observed some tension between the couple, noting a minor argument, but nothing serious. The next morning, they met again. That evening, Vincent shared his kayaking plans with his friends, but they were unable to change his mind due to his stubbornness. Despite the cold weather, the next day, Vincent suggested they make up and go on vacation to the Hudson, and Angelica agreed immediately. The couple had planned to take photos at Bannerman Castle, which was located in the middle of the river. Angelica had brought some nice outfits for the photo shoot. By 4 p.m., they had reached the riverbank and were ready to leave for the island. Angelica noticed that the wind had picked up considerably. It was cold, and rain was in the forecast, but that didn't stop them. The couple enjoyed extreme sports and felt confident because they had paddled in similar conditions before. Angelica's timeline was confirmed by the photos they took. She mentioned that they had had a few beers beforehand. They both drank enough to enjoy themselves while ensuring they were sober when they got home to drive. During questioning, Angelica told the police that she knew there was a problem with the drain plug on Vincent's kayak. He needed to replace it, but she did not check it before they left. The journey to the castle was difficult, and Vincent often passed her. The pair made good use of the large waves. However, on the way back, Angelica noticed that Vincent had suddenly fallen far behind. The waves grew higher, and suddenly he started calling out to her, asking her to contact rescuers. When Angelica turned around, she saw that Vincent's kayak was taking on water and starting to sink. Vincent struggled to stay afloat, while the current carried Angelica toward the shore, making it impossible for her to return to help him. She had no choice but to go to shore to call for rescue. By then, Vincent had disappeared from sight. They searched for Vincent all night, and the next day, a search operation continued. Divers scoured the river for his body, while boats equipped with sonar scanned the water. Search teams worked throughout the day despite the fog and high waves. Rescue helicopters were also deployed. Vincent's family was shocked and distraught by his disappearance. Among them, Angelica appeared the calmest. She continued to post various photos and videos on social media, which seemed out of place given the circumstances. When asked, she said she still hoped Vincent would be rescued and remained positive. However, his relatives felt she was indifferent to the severity of the situation. Meanwhile, searchers knew that almost no one, not even a skilled athlete, could survive in such harsh conditions. 10 days after Vincent went missing, Angelica was called in for further questioning. She casually mentioned that she might have removed the drain plug from Vincent's kayak when they returned. This led the police to suspect that his disappearance might not have been accidental, and that she might have been involved in his drowning. She also mentioned that Vincent's oar was broken, which she had tried to fix. According to her statement, she had removed the fixing ring from the oar blade. The police believed that the unscrewed drain plug and the broken oar suggested that Angelica might have wanted to kill him. However, they could not understand her motive, as killing someone before marrying him seemed absurd, especially since she did not yet have citizenship or inheritance rights to his property. To gather more information about Angelica, the police decided to interview her acquaintances, which led them to her ex-boyfriend. He was shocked to hear that Angelica might be a murderer. However, the investigation had only just begun. He admitted that Angelica had a darker side. He recalled several times they had drunk together, during which Angelica often caused conflict. He described her as manipulative, noting that she did not want him to go out without her. During questioning, Angelica admitted that there were indeed problems in her relationship. She believed that these problems were related to Vincent's need for intimacy. She expressed that they should break up. The police soon identified a possible motive for the murder. Angelica inherited about $500,000 from his life insurance policy, of which she was named the primary beneficiary. This money could have solved her financial difficulties and helped her start over, especially since she was unemployed. Despite the overwhelming evidence against her, Angelica maintained her innocence. She was arrested and released on bail before her trial, facing a charge of second-degree murder. Her attorney argued that the confession obtained during an 11-hour interrogation should not be considered valid. The defense attorney emphasized the autopsy and its results to determine if there were signs of violence, which would be necessary to establish the murder charge. He claimed that the incident was an unfortunate accident. The attorney believed that the kayak likely capsized due to the waves, or that the drain plug came loose when the kayak was hit by the waves. There was also discussion of the strong winds, cold water, and lack of a life jacket. However, Angelica was wearing a life jacket and took precautions for her safety, unlike Vincent. Vincent, on the other hand, had no regard for his own safety and was drunk, which may have influenced his actions. To counter the prosecutor's claims, the attorney conducted an investigation on the Hudson River. He had a man of similar build to Vincent use a similarly styled kayak to demonstrate how low the water level was in the small boat. The attorney argued that large waves could have quickly flooded the kayak, even without the drain plug being removed. Drunken Vincent may have made several mistakes despite his skill and training, suggesting that the incident should be considered an accident. There is some debate about whether the kayak could have absorbed enough water to sink quickly several miles from shore. The drain plug was particularly controversial. It was a small hole, about the size of a pinky finger, located on the top of Vincent's model kayak. This raises the question of whether a significant amount of water could have entered through the hole if it had been left open. To investigate this theory, additional tests were conducted using the same kayak model and a mannequin of the same weight and size as Vincent. Tests were performed to determine how much water could have entered through the open drain plug while the rest of the kayak was sealed. The results showed that the hole was too small. Each wave that struck the kayak only allowed a few drops of water to enter. Therefore, they were able to paddle several kilometers to safety. A small hole would certainly not have been enough to sink the entire kayak. The lawyer argued that Vincent's kayak could have capsized due to the strong waves, especially considering his level of intoxication. This explanation seemed more plausible than the theory that it had flooded because of the drain plug. During questioning, Angelica admitted that she had removed the drain plug from Vincent's kayak. This raised suspicions that she had done so to cause trouble for her fiancé, who was considering calling off the wedding. The potential life insurance payout could have seemed like a path to a better future for her. The defense believed that Angelica's comments led the police to charge her with murder. The police had dismissed the possibility of an accident, despite clear evidence of bad weather. To address this issue, the attorneys called in an expert with years of experience working with criminals. This expert scrutinized every detail of Angelica's 11-hour interrogation. The expert believes that the police repeatedly violated the rules of interrogation. They clearly pressured Angelica, causing her to give false statements. During her conversation with the police, Angelica mentioned that she adjusted and tried to tighten the drain plug. However, throughout the recording, there is no clear confession to the murder. The frightened and exhausted girl fell into a trap by misunderstanding some of the police's vague questions. The interrogation mainly involved the police trying to get Angelica to repeat what she had said on the island where Vincent drowned. The expert noted that she was clearly frightened, slightly intoxicated, and traumatized by witnessing her lover drown. In such a state, it would be unreasonable to interpret her statements as evidence of guilt. However, when she arrived at the station, the police put considerable pressure on her, focusing particularly on the words she had said near the Hudson River. An expert interrogator observed clear signs of manipulation during the interrogation. Through many leading questions, the police discovered that the underlying motive was anger over Vincent's unorthodox views on intimacy. Police explained Angelica's actions by mentioning her touching the boat's drain plug, which they believe led to Vincent's drowning. The expert suspected that Angelica's confession was coerced, although not through physical violence. The police employed many classic interrogation techniques to extract a confession. When Angelica finally mentioned that she had thought about getting out of the relationship, the police treated this as a confession to murder. However, contrary to the prosecutor's belief, she never used the word murder during the conversation at the station. After the police heard what they wanted, they ignored all of Angelica's other statements. In fact, she claimed that this was not the first time she had encountered problems with the kayak. The issues had started a few months before the Vincent's crash. In the winter, the button had been missing for a while, and during that time, they visited the reservoirs and floated without any problems. Unfortunately, the police noticed inconsistencies in Angelica's testimony. She initially said that there was a button, but then insisted that there was none. This inconsistency caused the police to intensify their questioning. The key moment in the interrogation that the expert examined was when Angelica began to break down. She cried and expressed a need to care for her cat at home. After a grueling 11 hours at the police station, she looked exhausted. The police seemed to see her emotional state as an opportunity to extract a confession to the murder. They increased the pressure and asked her leading questions. Ultimately, however, Angelica did not confess to the crime. The expert concluded that the erroneous answers given during questioning were misleading. Angelica's anxiety and intense desire to escape the unpleasant situation caused her to give some inaccurate answers. She did not know that these answers would be used to build a case against her for a murder she did not commit. On the morning of Saturday, May 23, 2015, Vincent's body was discovered a month after his disappearance in the Hudson River. A boatman found the body a few miles downstream from Bannerman Island, where the couple had been visiting that fateful day. An autopsy was performed, and the medical examiner determined that Vincent had drowned. He likely died from the cold water and strong currents, which made it difficult for him to stay afloat. There were no signs of violence, physical assault, or strangulation on his body. However, there was some alcohol in his blood. although not in excessive amounts. They also started looking for the kayak in that direction. After a while, they found it drifting a few hundred meters away. It turned out that Vincent's kayak had lost its drain plug. They found the paddle, and it was still usable. The defense argued that the lack of a drain plug and problems with the paddle could not have caused the drowning. They claimed that only when combined with other factors, such as water temperature, wind conditions, the absence of a life jacket, and the influence of alcohol, could Vincent's situation have led to the tragedy. The prosecutor's office then focused on inconsistencies in Angelica's testimony, believing that they pointed to her involvement in the murder. The attorney argued that the incident was an accident due to Vincent's own negligence. He had been intoxicated in rough waters and was not wearing a life jacket. Vincent was fully aware that the water was cold, and that if he fell in, his chances of survival would be virtually non-existent. Angelica maintained her innocence, but the situation soon changed. The prosecutor's office began to realize that proving she had attempted murder by pulling the drain plug from his kayak would be too difficult. This weak evidence made it challenging for them to convince a jury of her guilt. Meanwhile, Angelica's defense attorney worked extensively with experts, presenting strong factual arguments to support her case. Angelica was offered a plea deal to plead guilty to involuntary manslaughter. Under state law, second-degree murder is punishable by life in prison, while charges involving negligent conduct or accidents are punishable by 1 to 4 years in prison. Given the time she had already spent in custody, her attorney advised her to accept the deal. Angelica agreed, and her confession helped her avoid a jury trial. She was eventually sentenced to 4 years in prison, most of which she served while awaiting trial. On December 21, 2017, Angelica was paroled after serving 32 months. Vincent's family and friends were unhappy with the decision, still believing she had killed her fiancé. Despite their accusations, Angelica maintained her innocence, claiming that only she and God knew the truth. After her release, she sought peace, but faced the threat of deportation and challenges in finding employment. Angelica attempted to claim benefits from Vincent's insurance policy, but her earlier guilty plea made this impossible. She was then forced to return to her home country. There, she enrolled in college, found a job, and resumed her life, fully recovering from the trauma of her past. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ashley Dale. On a summer night in 2022, an innocent woman fell victim in Liverpool's Old Swan district, just a few miles from the city centre. At 12:41 a.m. on August 21, 2022, police received a call from a neighbor reporting a violent situation taking place next door. When the police arrived, the house was eerily quiet, with the front door clearly broken open, suggesting that a violent incident had occurred. The back door leading to the garden was left ajar. As the police cautiously entered the garden, they discovered the body of a woman. Just a few meters away, her mobile phone appeared to have slipped from her hand in her final moments. They quickly understood the gravity of the situation when they found a number of spent bullet casings scattered around the house. While one officer was investigating the crime scene, other officers arrived, waking several neighbors with the noise. Neighbors reported hearing gunshots coming from the house, while others said they heard screeching tires and car alarms going off hours before the incident. The tragic event left everyone in the area shocked. Neighbors helped the police identify the victim as 28-year-old Ashley Dale. Ashley grew up in a close-knit family and was the oldest of 3 siblings. In 2015, her younger brother was mistakenly murdered by a gang at the age of 16. Ashley was deeply affected by the death of her younger brother, which changed her outlook on life. However, she persevered, using her grief as motivation to study and eventually earn a degree in environmental conservation. This achievement led to a fulfilling career as an environmental conservationist, where she thrived and earned the respect of her colleagues. They admired not only her dedication to her work but also her genuine compassion for those around her. In her role, Ashley focused on various projects to improve living conditions and public health in the city, establishing herself as a hardworking, intelligent, and goal-oriented person. In her personal life, Ashley Dale cherished time with her family, friends, and dog. Her loved ones described her as intelligent, kind, and caring. Despite her difficult past and the pain of losing a loved one, she moved forward with determination and succeeded in her path. However, things became more complicated when she started dating Lee Harrison, a man with deep ties to the criminal world. His connections to gangs caused serious concerns for Ashley's family, who feared for her safety. Although Ashley believed that Lee was gradually changing, she still trusted him. Lee Harrison, a 28-year-old man from Liverpool, was deeply involved with many gangs and banned substance trafficking. He was particularly close to Neil Berry, a local banned substance dealer. However, their friendship began to decline in 2018 due to issues related to banned substance and trust. That year, Neil was robbed of $50,000 worth of banned substance hidden in his home in an incident orchestrated by a rival gang. Neil suspected that Lee Harrison may have informed his rivals about the incident. Although Lee denied any wrongdoing, their relationship soured, turning them into enemies. In June 2022, Lee Harrison and Ashley Dale bumped into each other at the Glastonbury Festival, rekindling old feelings. However, they also encountered a member of Neil's gang, leading to a violent brawl due to their rivalry. Neil, who was at the festival, threatened to stab Lee the next time they encountered each other. The following day, police arrested Neil and his friends for his threatening behavior. Luckily for Neil, a friend of his took the blame when a knife was found next to Neil's passport, claiming it was his. The friend, James Witham, was later arrested on suspicion of carrying a weapon, but despite the police involvement, tensions remained high following the Glastonbury incident. Ashley's life changed dramatically after that. The encounter with the gang left her feeling paranoid and fearful. Over the following weeks, her concerns about physical threats from Neil Berry grew. Not only had he threatened them during the festival, but he had also warned that he would show up at their home address. This terrifying prospect had a profound effect on Ashley, and she confided in her best friend. She expressed her anxiety in a text message, saying she can't stop thinking that something is wrong. As her anxiety grew, Ashley reached out to several friends for support. In another message, she described how distressing the situation had become and how it was affecting her mental health. Despite her efforts to calm herself, Ashley couldn't shake the feeling that something worse was ahead. Unfortunately, her intuition was correct. On the evening of August 20th, 2022, Ashley posted a photo of herself relaxing on the couch, completely unaware of what would happen after dark. Then, her car alarm suddenly went off. It was her car, but she ignored it. Frustrated, she continued to enjoy the evening and texted a friend about the siren going off again, assuming it was because of the rain. The message seemed normal, but there was a paranoid undertone. That night, she sent another message saying, "She don't know, but it looks like someone is outside." Over time, Ashley's anxiety increased, and her car alarm went off again, reinforcing her belief that someone was outside and that something was seriously wrong. On the morning of August 21st, the doorbell rang, and Ashley sensed that it was bad news. The sound echoed through the quiet house, and suddenly, the door swung open, revealing an armed man standing in the doorway. He acted quickly, opening fire without giving her a chance to react. In a panic, Ashley grabbed her phone and ran out the back door. The attacker then moved throughout the house, shooting into several rooms in an attempt to find her, hoping she was hiding in the backyard. Ashley faced her final moments with extreme fear. She could not escape the violence or her fatal injuries, and the final text messages she sent just before the attack served as a haunting reminder of her awareness of the danger. Tragically, Ashley Dale was murdered, and many suspect that Lee Harrison's connection to gang activity contributed to her death. Police discovered that all of Ashley's tires had been slashed, likely due to the attacker's actions, which had set off her car alarm. Police believe this was a deliberate attempt to lure Ashley and Lee Harrison away from their home. When her family heard her last text message, they were devastated to realize that she had sensed something was seriously wrong. Fortunately, Ashley's text message contained vital information that would help solve her murder. Police now need to piece together the evidence. However, the investigation remains tense and complicated, especially because of her boyfriend, Lee Harrison. He happened to be absent during the shooting and was very unwilling to cooperate with the police, even refusing to testify. When he was brought in for questioning, he chose to remain silent, which hampered the investigation. He changed his mobile phone number and shunned Ashley's entire family, leaving them devastated. Lee's lack of empathy only increased concerns about his possible involvement in her death. Police were surprised to discover that shortly after Ashley's death, he had gone on holiday and left the country. This raised suspicions among the police, who wondered if he had done this to avoid prosecution. While he was on holiday, they focused on the events that took place on the night of August 20, 2022. Surveillance camera footage showed them entering a store. After making a purchase, they left and got into a gray Hyundai i3. This car later became key evidence, as another surveillance camera recorded it near Ashley's home earlier that day. Surveillance camera footage captured a car approaching Ashley's home, showing the driver surveying the area before the attack that evening. James Witham and Joseph Pierce approached Ashley's Volkswagen parked outside the family home and punctured the tires in order to set off the alarm. They attempted to lure Lee or Ashley out, but neither responded. Frustrated, they decided to retreat and come up with a new plan, which went badly wrong. An hour later, both men returned to Ashley's home, but this time one of them was armed, indicating their violent intentions. They broke into the house by forcing down the front door and saw Ashley running toward the back door. When she reached the garden door, James fired 8 shots from his pistol, hitting her in the back. After watching her fall, he went upstairs and fired 5 more shots into an empty bedroom, possibly as a threat. After a quick survey of the house and finding no one else inside, James quickly ran downstairs. Both James and Joseph then fled the scene. Fortunately, a neighbor's surveillance camera recorded the events that followed the attack. James and Joseph checked into a hotel in St. Helens to avoid detection. However, the police were able to track their movements and quickly located their car, leading to their arrest. Meanwhile, Neil Berry, who played a key role in organizing the attack, was spotted at a local golf club. Intelligence reports also indicated that he had been seen at a golf resort. The police worked together effectively to arrest him, and soon a fourth accomplice, Sean Zeiss, was arrested in connection with Ashley's murder. After the arrest and indictment of James Witham, Neil Berry, Sean Zeiss, and Joseph Pierce, the police gathered evidence, leading to the start of the trial. James Witham, who shot Ashley, initially claimed he did not intend to kill her. He argued that he intended to shoot her as a warning but accidentally hit her, asserting that her death was accidental. However, this defense was difficult to believe in court due to the overwhelming evidence, including previous threats, text messages, extensive surveillance camera footage, and numerous witness statements. When Ashley discovered that 2 armed men had broken into her home, she screamed in fear and tried to escape through the back door. James, who was armed, had time to aim. He fired 2 shots at Ashley, hitting her in the back as she tried to run away. It was clear that he had shot her intentionally. In November 2023, at Liverpool Crown Court, the judge sentenced James Witham, 41, Neil Berry, 26, Sean Zeiss, 28, and Joseph Peers, 29, for murder, conspiracy to murder, and unlawful possession of a firearm. The four were sentenced to a total of 173 years in prison. James was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 43 years, Neil to life with the possibility of parole after 47 years, Joseph to life with the possibility of parole after 41 years, and Sean to life with the possibility of parole after 42 years. The sentencing of Ashley Dales for killers has left her family with mixed emotions. Although they feel that justice has been served, it can never replace the profound loss they have experienced. Ashley Dale's tragic death has left her family in a state of grief. Ashley's mother described the loss as life-changing. Adding to their grief, Ashley's younger brother was killed by the same gang. Her father lamented, "Ashley, the eldest of my 3 children, and my son are now both gone." Despite the loss, the family has become advocates against gang violence, working to unite the community and provide support through memorials for Ashley. Meanwhile, Ashley's boyfriend, Lee Harrison, has faced no consequences and remains at large. Even after his girlfriend was murdered, he continued to sell banned substance for profit. Gun violence in the UK is low, with one of the lowest gun-related homicide rates in the world. Despite a population increase since 2011, the average number of gun homicides in the UK remains at 29 per year. The level of gang violence in the UK has only increased in recent years, possibly due to poverty and lack of education. The situation in the gang world is not improving,